Àní ṣubú dànù. All right. Yay. Let's share it. All right, so let's get our folks down. Mr. Hamid and NBA. Thank you very much. It's a delight listening to you and hearing you share your thoughts. Thank you very much. All right. I'm a boss no yàrá akẹ́kọ̀ọ́ báyìí. So before we get into all of that, please power tap. Let's power tap on Twitter. I think our YouTube is good now. We'll check, shall. Bó ṣe dùn fáwọn kọ́ lónìí ra fọ́ọ̀mù ẹlòmíì. Mo dúpẹ́ tèmi o, ọba aláṣẹ àánú. So let's quickly do that, and then we can get into today's session. The class. So please like the live. Let's share the live. Just give me a few seconds to quickly do this. Please click on the heart icon above my head if you're on TikTok, and let's do this together. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to apologize to our folks on YouTube. Sincerely, I don't know if it's a device issue or the platform, the streaming platform, or the app we're using to stream, but I think there's an issue somewhere. But please try and bear with us. It might be so well. All right, please let's power up as well. We're going to go straight into today's session. Mumbo. YouTube here. All right. Sorry, guys. Please, anyone here who uses YouTube, if you can please check. I'm sure we're good, but okay. What's on be? No, mo kàn fẹ́ rí dájú pé a ti ń ṣe dáadáa lórí YouTube ni o tó bá ti rí tán. Ó tiẹ̀ ti dá báwọn. Ẹni tí wà lórí YouTube ẹ jẹ́ bá like live yìí o. Yorùbá náà gbé wá lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ báyìí sìn tó bá ti gbó tó òyìnbó wá máa sọ òyìnbó bọ́ lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ báyìí atẹ́gùn tó ń fẹ́ báyìí sìn atẹ́gùn èdè Yorùbá ni ẹni tó bá lórí YouTube ẹ bá like ẹ bá fẹ́ràn ẹ̀ wọ́n lọ sọ fẹ́ràn wọ́n máa kọ́ ẹ̀yìn gbọ́. Please like it. Please like the live, and I apologize to our YouTube people, our YouTube viewers on YouTube. We had some issues with the streaming, but we're good now, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you very, very much. Kubali Danoni. All right. Where were we? So our main text has been Awo, the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Please, if you're on TikTok, we need to power tap. Let's try and get this to 70K, please. Let's do that, please. On YouTube, please like the live. Facebook as well. So for YouTube, is like it. Yeah, could you bear law? Could you bear law? There might be no. Just trying to sort things out. All right, thank you for liking on YouTube, on TikTok, and sharing as well. Now let's get into our teaching for today. We're done with the news. Now we're going into class. All stand, greet. All stand, greet. Which one is it? Is it all stand? Is all stand? Thank you, Nezuko. Thank you so much. All stand, greet. Good afternoon, sir. You're welcome to Kineko. God bless you, sir, and your family. Amen. At the current break, I just share me relate to by Amasha, me relate to by ya. All right. Again, thank you very much for being here. It's been a wonderful session so far. We've been Hola Lucas, I didn't know you're in the country. We'll talk. But good to see you. Good to see you here. They will now see you in person later. So thanks everybody for being here. Wonderful session we've had so far. Buddhist couple say, "Oh, Stanley, me more." Did you go to school at Abule? Excuse me. Did you go to school at Abule? Okay, great to be here. Let's start the class. Let's get started. So we've been talking about Awolowo for a while now. Like I said the other time, it's intentional, him and also the things he has done, and then learn from him and use that as a basis for understanding of Nigerian politics. Because as far as I'm concerned, I think when it comes to political ideology in Nigeria's political history, the persons who have lived, many people lived also during his time. He had peers. A lot of them were good, and that's not because I'm Yoruba. It's just because it is what it is. You read his books, you read the books of others, and you're able to lived around the time that he did, and who worked with him and who worked with others have also said the same thing. And so I thought it's important for us to spend time studying him, understand adventures and so on and so forth. And so I looked at the issue of constitution in Nigeria. We've talked about loads and loads of stuff. So if you go on YouTube channel, you'll be able to find previous videos, and then you can come up to speed on the things we've discussed so far. All right, the primary stuff, that's his own book, and it's been a treasure trove for us. Yeah, so now we're talking about state creation, right? We're talking about constitution earlier, and now we're turning a new leaf to focus specifically on state creation with the linguistic states, where e.g. you have Yoruba state, Igbo state, Hausa state, and so on and so forth. Please, if you're on TikTok, we really need to part up this thing. I don't think we're safe. On TikTok, and the numbers are low. Part up. YouTube people are doing a fantastic job. I see you. Everybody here has liked the live, so thank you very much for doing that. By the way, there's also a heart icon bottom left of your screen. That's your own right. Please click on it. You'll see hearts, emojis and stuff. Please click on it as well, so that way the algorithm notices engagement and can therefore recommend the live stream to other people. All right. So I was saying, that originally our idea of state creation, So our idea of state creation has always, our idea of state creation has always been ethno-linguistic states. So we would want to have a Yoruba state, a Hausa state, Igbo state, and so on and so forth. But it didn't get that. So what we're left with was 3 regions, right? And when Macpherson Constitution came into force, it didn't change much, right? We still had 3 regions. But you see, before all of this happened, there was, I jumped a particular information the last time we spoke. And I remember it was after the session I remember, I wrote it in my book here. There's a part here where Papa talked about how Dr. Azikiwe came to meet them in 1953 in front of the House of Representatives. I'm just going to quickly read that, and then we can move very fast. It says, before we went to London for the conference, what Constitution? Just before we went to London for the conference, an alliance was concluded between the Action Group and the NCNC in Azikiwe, who of his own volition came to embrace me in front of the House of Representatives buildings on 31st March 1953, after the members of the NCNC in the House had joined those of my party to walk out of the House. What I did context, what I did not mention was why they walked out. They walked that Anthony Nauro moved the motion for the independence of Nigeria. All right, Action Group was there, of course. NPC, everybody was there. NCNC. Anthony Nauro had moved that motion on behalf of our Action Group, or representing Action Group, saying that we'd like to have independence by 1956, and it was because, of course, the North said as soon as practicable, right? That was why the Action Group members had to stage a walkout. And while they were walking out, of course, the NCNC members also followed them, and then they walked out together. It was at that point that Azikiwe then came up with the idea of an alliance between Action Group and NCNC. That was the first time the NCNC and Action Group had an alliance. And it was at the behest of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. And then he talked about how, Azikiwe, that the alliance itself was short-lived. It didn't last very long, apparently because, Zik was Zik. And how do I know that? Because it says here, at our first joint meeting, we took up the question of federalism. It did not take us any time to persuade Dr. Azikiwe. It must be said to his credit that he is himself a believer in federalism. Indeed, he is a believer in many a good cause. The only often than not, there is a wide gap between what he believes and what he preaches, and between what he preaches and what he practices, right? And so, by 1953, at the conference, Azikiwe was saying federalism was imperative. Meanwhile, a couple of years before then, I said unitary system was the way to go, and then a few years before then, I had mentioned, federalism. So, like I said, in order to understand Nigerian politics, I would rather study. I study everybody, right? But the person I would devote more of my attention to, of course, would be Awo, because he seemed to be more stable, and his ideologies or his thoughts were his ideologies was well. Let me put it this way: his ideology was well thought out, right? His writings, he could change the methods, but the concept was fundamentally the same throughout. For me, that's somebody who actually took time to understand stuff before espousing those ideals, unlike some other guys. All right, moving on very quickly. We also mentioned that in 1953 there was this matter of Lagos State becoming the capital of Nigeria, 1953, and based on that, the Action Group, was against that particular thing, and also came up with the idea of a secession. That was the first and only time the Yoruba people talked about secession. Was because taking Lagos from Yoruba land, taking Lagos, making Lagos FC. That it's important to say it again and again. So I'm going to move very, very fast so that we don't have to go back through the things that we discussed already. So the last time we also talked about the way the conference went in 1957 in London, and we talked about how the Western region, the Action Group, I should say, had been experiencing a lot of bickering from folks in the Midwest about the idea that they wanted to start their own states. They were talking about wanting to start their states, they wanted to have the Benin and Warri provinces become a separate state. And Awo said in his book that he was for it, like he was okay with the idea as long as the place was viable, but he couldn't tell if it was viable because at the time he didn't have access to the finances of the government. Again, like I said the other time, Awo did not become premier until 1954, right? It was first local government. What's the word they use? One second though. Let me not misquote. Minister was the Minister of Local Government, and then of course leader of the party. became the leader of government business in 1952, but he didn't become the premier until 1954. And these things help us to understand the structure of the time at the time. Also, we jumped what happened in 1951, and it was intentional. We had a session where we discussed the whole cross-carpeting thing. What Azikiwe wanted to do in Yoruba land, how he wanted to, gain political power and political ascendancy. We'll probably talk about that much later. But the point I'm trying to make is that as at 1952, he didn't have all the information, but he supported the idea. But the action group was against it. They were against it because of the three regions at the time, the western region was the smallest. Again, the eastern region is not Igbo land. So I remember somebody said the other day that no, Yoruba western region was big. Again, history doesn't care about our feelings, right? It was the smallest landmass, in terms of landmass, right? The eastern region was not just Igbo land, it's not just southeast. It is most of south today. That's minus Edo and Delta states, right? So Ẹkáàbọ State, Cross River State, River State, a huge part of Bayelsa State, all of Igbo land, southeastern Nigeria, and then southern Cameroon or western Cameroon, depending on where you're looking at it from, right? All of that was eastern Nigeria. The biggest, of course, was the north. The second was eastern region, and then the smallest by landmass was the western region. But you see, the folks in the western, in the Benin and Delta provinces wanted to create Midwest. If you did that, according to the action group, you would be reducing our size, number one. Number two, we also were not going to have any influence in the Midwest. Why? Because from time, folks in those two provinces voted more NCNC than AG. So the AG was against it based on that. But by 1955, the COR, right, Calabar, Ogoja, and Rivers provinces also began to agitate for their own state. It became louder in 1955. And so at the time, the AG was like, okay, you know what, since there's another group that wants to break out of the eastern region, we can allow the Midwest, or we can support the Midwest living as long as the COR will also be allowed to live by the eastern region. Now, just around the same time, the Middle Belt agitation also became very loud. But the AG did not support the Middle Belt breaking away, although Awolowo supported it. And the reason they did not support it was because the AG and MPC were in coalition in 1955. All right? By the way, I think that was the only time that the AG and MPC, this was of course before independence. Anyway, they were to go to London and have this conversation on state creation. So that's what we're discussing today. Some of the things I said last week, I'm going to say it again. Sorry, last time. 1 second, please. I think I need a drink. Sorry about that. I'm good now. All right. So I was saying that there were some things I said on Monday. I'm going to repeat much later, but let's get into this book. So I'm reading chapter 13 of the book Awo, the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. The NPC and its leader, the Sardauna of Sokoto, made certain moves before the 1957 conference, by means of which the action group was rendered almost hors de combat and splendidly outmaneuvered when the question of new states came up for discussion at the conference. Parties was desirable in order that both of them might exchange ideas in regard to proposals to be made by the NPC and the action group at the coming constitutional conference. What conference? The one that will be held in London in 1957. Right? It was thought that such an exchange of ideas would facilitate proceedings at the conference and might lead to closer collaboration between the two parties. In order to ensure secrecy for the proposed meeting, the venue chosen was the house of Alhaji S.O. Gbadamosi, one of the outstanding leaders of the action group, in his hometown, Ikorodu, some 20 miles from Lagos. The meeting was held on 3rd, 10th, and 17th March 1957. Neither the Sardauna nor I attended, but agreed to be bound by the conclusions reached there. Consequently, the action group and the NPC teams at the meeting were respectively led by Chief S. Akitola and Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. Each of them is the deputy leader of his party. On the issues of creating new states and revising regional boundaries, the following conclusions, which were recorded in the minutes of the meeting, were reached. Please, let's power tap, let's pay attention, we're diving deep. Creation of new states. It was agreed that all claims for the creation of new states should be referred to a commission of independent men who will be appointed by the Secretary of State. The commission would consider in the first instance whether the proposed new state is viable on the creation of the state. It will not be included, provided its separation from the new state is geographically possible. But if it is an island within the proposed new state, then it must form part of the new state. What's the meaning of all this, Turenchi? Quickly, what it means basically is this. There is agitation for creation of new states in the Western region. There's also agitation for creation of new states in the Eastern region and also in the Northern region, right? Remember, the Midwest, the COR, and the Middle Belt. They were going to say when they got to London. And what they discussed, and they said, listen, in order to create new states, let's ask for an independent commission to be established that will look into that matter, right? And then that commission would then ask two questions. Number one, would that state be able to provide the services that people in those provinces? So for instance, you had many provinces in Western region. Two of them wanted to have their own states. If they had their own state, would they be able to continue with the free education that everybody was getting in Western region? Right. So you have to think of, are they going to be able to provide those services to the people? They're already used to having free education. If you can't provide it, then that means that you are not able to stand on your own 2 feet and give the people what they were used to. Number two, they also ask about viability. In other words, can the region sustain itself? Can they pay salaries? Can they take care of their business the way things were done in the become dependent on the region from which they were coming out of, right? So you now have those two things as the major criteria, right, in creating new states. Of course, this helps the North and the West. And I'll say, you know what, whether it's Midwest or Middle Belt, let's talk to the Secretary of State, right, and ask him to create that commission that will talk about that matter, which is also one of the reasons that led to the Williams Commission of 1957, with their report coming out in 1958. The second thing they talked about was revision of regional boundaries. It was agreed by both sides after some discussion that any ethnic group within an existing region can join a neighboring region if the majority of such ethnic group desired it, and provided that the region which it seeks to join is willing to accept it. What does that mean? So again, remember that the way they created those regions at the time, they didn't really care for ethnicity, right? And that's why you had Yoruba people caught into the northern part of Nigeria. You had Igbo people caught into the western part of Nigeria. So the idea behind this second point is the fact that the Yoruba people that were caught into the north could decide to be part of the western region, provided the majority of people in that place want to join the western region, and provided the western region was willing to accept them. So when you look at the two things they agreed to here, it looks like this makes sense. Like, this is what the West would like, and the North was also willing to consider on these matters. And this looked like a very good idea. So the idea would be to take this thing to London and I tell the Oyinbo, Oga, now wait, me won't be this so. But instead of the two of them, the North and the West, doing this, something else happened in Ibadan. Shortly after this Ikorodu meeting between the Action Group and the NPC, the Sardauna of Sokoto, Premier of the Northern Region, personally visited me at Ibadan. Now that the Action Group and the NPC had reached agreement on a wide variety of vital issues, it would be an excellent thing, the Sardauna suggested, if the concurrence of the NCNC could be secured to as many points as possible. He thought the best approach would be for him to convene a summit meeting of the three premiers, that is himself, myself, and Dr. Azikiwe, together with the advisors. I supported the Sardauna's proposed summit meeting because I saw in it the potential instrument by which, I'll tell that again, I supported the Sardauna's proposed summit meeting because I saw in it the potential instrument by means of which Dr. Azikiwe and the NCNC might be brought to heel on a number of tricky issues. I also thought that if the three of us were leaders of our respective delegations to the conference, I'll take that again. I also thought that if the three of us who were leaders of our respective delegations to the conference could reach agreement on any matter, we would be able to present a united front on such a matter to the Secretary of State for the Colonies and the United Kingdom delegation. So, what's this, Turenchi? What we're saying basically is this. The North and the West already agreed, but the North, through the Premier of the North, Sadauna, then said to Awo, listen, both of us have agreed on this matter, it makes sense, but why not let's get the third person to agree to these things? Excuse me. Why not let's get this third person to agree to this thing so that when we get to London, we'll present a united front. And I remember saying last week that one major reason they had to do this, when I thought about it, because I had to ask questions like, why would you even think of Zik? Knowing who Zik was, Zik didn't really care for anybody like that. Only Zik was very egotic. And he was always thinking about his own region. So why would you even... Meanwhile, he was always saying that he's nationalist. Like, so my own question was, why would they do that? Why do they even need to spend their time trying to get Zik on board? Then we talked about what happened in 1954. There was a similar conference in 1954, and Zik was there. And it was at that conference that Chief Obafemi Awolowo suggested the inclusion of secession clause. And it was supported by Ahmadu Bello. You know, I've thought about this thing over and over again, and I think that Nigeria would have been greater if the North and the West had worked together. And I have my own understanding I have my own theories about how that could have worked out, but we also see some of those things playing out now with the North and the West working together. But I wish we did this in the 1950s, to be honest. By now, Nigeria will be... all things being equal, nobody knows all the full details anyway, but the point is that they brought him in because the last time they went to London, and two of them had a differing opinion from what Zik had. The Igbo people supported Zik because they found that since the three of you have no cohesion, they could easily introduce the division, right? Two people on one hand, one person on this other hand, but the British decided to support that one person. So it would make sense for the three of them to have a united front before even getting to the UK. So that way, if the Oyinbo won't enter, there's nothing for the Oyinbo to build the division on, right? For the lizard to be able to get into your wall, that means the wall is cracked. The point is that if you can fix that wall, then the lizard has nowhere to go, right? At least not in your wall. So that was the reason for that meeting, okay? The Premier Summit meeting was duly convened, and it was held in Lagos on 16th and 17th April 1957. On April 15, that was the day before the commencement of the summit meeting, there was a preliminary meeting of the Premier's advisors. Sorry, guys. Thank you for getting us to 71K on TikTok, but please don't stop our tapping. Thank you very much. On April 15, that was the day before the commencement of the summit meeting, there was a preliminary meeting of the Premier's advisors. The purpose of this meeting the purpose of this meeting of advisors was to recommend to the Premiers subjects to be discussed and the procedures to be followed at their meeting. Those present at the preliminary meeting of advisors were Dr. K.O. Mbadiwe and Chief Kola Balogun for the NCNC, Chief S. Akintola for the Action Group, and Alhaji Aliyu Makamambida and Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa for the NPC. One of the procedures recommended and which was accepted by the Premier's Summit meeting, in view of the advisors that the Premier's Conference should try and that the agreement reached should be binding on the parties concerned. Of the agreed decisions taken at the meeting of 16 April 1957, the one on the creation of new states is of great importance. Agreed that the creation of new states following principles the East, they're introducing new stuff, right, to make it, I think it's even better. So A, the wishes of the people of the area should be determined by a plebiscite or a referendum. A state boundary commission should be appointed by the Secretary of State in the first instance and by the government of the Federation after independence to determine the creation of new states. 3 decisions, among others, were 57, which I think ought to be reproduced in order that some of the events which followed and some of the comments and observations which I make later may be correctly appraised. They are: number 1, it was agreed that a joint memorandum or memoranda on all the points on which agreement had been reached should be prepared by me for signature or initialing by the 3 premiers. And independence of Nigeria, which was the keynote of the Premiers' Conference. Number 3, it was agreed that the premiers should hold further meetings after their arrival in the United Kingdom. So, basically is that on which of course will be the criteria for the creation of the new states, and they also agreed that they're going to have a memorandum presented. That the agreement they reached, which is contained in that memorandum or memoranda, will be what they will discuss, of course, with the Oyibo. Also, they agreed that the premiers, the 3 of them, will meet the minority groups in London. And then the third one is that in the UK, because all these things was happening in Lagos, so that when they get to the UK, after we had a meeting of the premiers, to which Dr. E.M.L. Ndeli, former president, for the first time. Why didn't they invite him all this while? Because they were already going to get out of Nigeria anyway. Northern People's Congress declared that they would not support any of on the independence of Nigeria in 1959. What does this mean? It means that they agreed to do something in Lagos. The idea of state creation, where they will have cassava and kola nut states in Nigeria. In Yoruba land. I think I mentioned this last time. They wanted to have, so we had 3 regions. They said, oh, don't touch northern region, don't touch eastern region, but that western region, break it into 4. They wanted Lagos and Colony State. They wanted Western State. They wanted Midwest State. They wanted Kola Nut and Cassava State. That's Azikiwe's very good idea of how to do stuff. Please stress it more. Stress what more? Please, you have to explain, That's Azikiwe's very good idea. That's his brilliant idea of state creation, where they will not touch the East, but they will break the West into 4. So to make it very clear, even though they had a plan before leaving Nigeria, in 54, they didn't have that plan on secession. And Azikiwe did what he did against Nigeria, because I believe he did against Nigeria. That's why his people are still suffering and are still agitating for secession that they will not get. The group that can bring secession to this Nigeria, I know the group. I don't like talking about it, but it's the truth. The group that can bring secession or break up Nigeria is not going to be like by shouting and by doing sit at home. The EU should not be the one to do it, especially because they're the ones who are against secession clause. But again, life happens. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, even though they agreed before leaving Nigeria that they were going to have states and this, and they had their own criteria and stuff like that, the 3 of them, the North, the West, the East, they all agreed. When they got to London, it was the East, with their party, NCNC, that actually changed everything and betrayed the trust of every other person. And because of what they did, the NPC then decided to pull out. Throughout the resumed Premier's meeting in London, in fact, let me read that part again from the top. To the utter astonishment of my colleagues and me, and quite contrary to the agreement reached at the summit meeting in Nigeria, the NPC declared that they would not support any of the decisions taken at the summit meeting, save the one on the independence of Nigeria in 1959. They remarked that they had adopted this attitude in clear and uncompromising resentment that the NCNC had submitted a welter of memoranda on the creation of new states, the contents of which were diametrically opposed to the principles agreed to at the Premier's Conference in Lagos. Throughout the resumed Premier's meeting in London, the NPC remained adamant and the NCNC uncommunicative. These are people that are shouting one Nigeria. Abi? You are a bigot. You are a trigot. These are the people. Because whatever you see from the Southeast today is the exact replica of what happened in the eastern region of those days and the NCNC. It's the same thing. So they change it, and they try to reach the NPC, of course. I want to get the power of change. NCNC that they were not communicative in London. After this meeting, the Action Group party line on the issue became rather jagged and disconcerted. In a series of meetings which followed, there was a long debate as to whether we should, as a party, press the issue at the conference table or not. The majority view which prevailed was that the delegates of the Action Group from the minority areas should submit memoranda to the conference on the subject, strictly in their capacity as members of their respective minority groups. I was, however, totally dissatisfied with this arrangement. There was a struggle within me between what I, as an individual, believed and cherished, and what the delegation which I led decided upon as the correct line of conduct in the prevailing circumstances. I thought that if the Action Group as a party was precluded from submitting a memorandum on the subject in order not to offend the NPC, I, as a delegate and as a Nigerian, should be permitted to make contributions to the discussions on the subject. I convened a meeting of the Action Group delegates and told them my mind. I assured them that whilst I was prepared to argue as forcefully as I could a case for the creation of the 3 proposed states, I would try to be objective and not to say anything that would be offensive to the NPC. I was given unanimous approval to this on condition that an advance copy of my speech was given to... I think these people going to say we're doing like Oyinbo. It's not even no, the ones not Oyinbo. They were doing like they were too courteous. AG was too courteous. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing at this point, but I think they were too courteous. They're trying to want them to know what's going on. We don't want to offend them. We want to do this. I hope you understand. I'm going to read. I'm going to explain it eventually. So it says, I convened a meeting of the Action Group delegates and told them my mind. I assured them that whilst I was prepared to argue as forcefully as I could a case for the creation of the 3 proposed states, that's the Midwest, COR, and Middle Belt. So it says, I was prepared to argue as forcefully as I could a case for the creation of the 3 proposed states. I would try to be objective and not to say anything that would be offensive to the NPC, because of course NPC and AG had a plan. They had an alliance at the time. I was given unanimous approval to this on condition that an advance copy of my speech was given to the NPC at least a day before I delivered it at the conference. As a matter of fact, I was able to let the Sadona have a copy 3 days before I delivered it. Let me explain what this is to you. Do you know it's a bit like deja vu? Remember in 1945, when the Ẹkáàbọ was founded in London, and the NCNC people started saying they were tribalists and bigots, and they were going to break Nigeria, or they were against the unity of Nigeria. What did they do? The Ẹkáàbọ published their aims and objectives, gave it to every student, and then said to the Igbo Federal Union that they were going to have a meeting with them to explain to them what they wanted to do. 1945. 12 years later, they are doing the same thing. The NPC is acting the way they're acting. Now you want to speak on the matter. They now say, print something on this matter and give it to them before the meeting. Why? maybe that's how they did things back in the day. What I've discovered is that people that do this, 1951 submitted names, NCNC did not. When it was time for manifesto, AG had manifesto, NCNC did not. As a matter of fact, NCNC was against the fact that AG was sharing the manifesto before election, saying that they would rather wait till the election was concluded before they told people what they wanted to do. Me, Boreri. So all this thing where you're sharing things with people and you're trying to give them that courtesy, that's why I don't really care so much for, trying to pander to anybody. There's no group in Nigeria that's worth the pandering of anyone, especially Yoruba ethnic group. There's none. Oh, what the? Anyway, he delivered the letter to Sardauna 3 days before his speech. At the conference table, the NPC insisted on the 3 regions remaining as they were, and of any provisions which would make possible the creation of more states at any future time. So the NCNC did not want to create any new states. Such provisions in our constitution, the NPC argued, would only help to encourage and keep alive the agitation for more states. And more states. Sorry, I'll tell you again. Such provisions in our constitution, the NPC argued, would only help to encourage and keep alive the agitation for more states and more states. The NCNC adopted a more devious approach. Guys, listen to this. So we've told you what the North wanted. They said, don't create any more states. Leave us as we are, 3 regions. Don't create any more, and don't include in the constitution that we're going to have provision for creation of more states in the future, because if you do, not only are we going to have new states, people would want to have more and more states, and that would affect, there will be no end to it. To be honest, it's happening right now. Sorry, my young nephew just came in. Where was I? Yes, somebody's writing Jebu State. Yes, so there will be no end to creation of states. We want more states and more states and more states. Meanwhile, think about this. If they have followed the original idea that Awo brought at the time, where he talked about ethno-linguistic states and how the smaller ones could be with the bigger ones until they are viable enough to have their own states, do you know it will not be like this? Now every state wants to have, every local government wants to become a state. Very soon, every state will become a state, which was what the NPC was saying at the time, but that was because they didn't follow the original plan that the AG had in 1953, which was, let's have a situation where, 1950, which was, let's have a situation where the ethnic group becomes the federating unit in Nigeria. So the NPC said, let's not create any more states. We are where we are. We have 3 regions. Let's keep it at 3. Let's not add anything. Of course, they were not being altruistic as well. They were also trying to hold on to the folks in the middle belt, especially the minorities. Go and play with them. It's a special guy. Holiday. They're on holiday. He came to visit his cousins. Now we're looking for the cousins. But that is Okale. It is well. Winsome says uncle duties. Now so we see Amo. Alright, where was I? Yes. So I was saying that the NPC, that's the Northern People's Congress, they were very clear about it. Like, let's just stay the way we are. Of course, that would affect the middle belt, but at the end of the day, they're not really hurting another group. I mean, they're not hurting any other existing region, right? Someone said we want Ijesha State. I think there was a bill for Ife Ijesha State the other time. I mean, we are Central Yoruba now, Abi. We are the Central Yoruba, so we'll see how that goes. After a while, if we adduce ethnicity, you can't be saying you have Yoruba State. You can't say you want Ijesha or Ijebu State. Just be like, we just build on what Awo was doing at the time. We missed out on something. No? We missed out on something. Everybody just crying. There's no road, there's no plane, there's no helicopter, there's no development. The structure is warped. We missed out on that man's wisdom. The only God fear us. Anyway, that's the NPC stance. The NCNC adopted a more devious approach. They did French room. The country should be divided into 17 states, which were named by them. Before they left Nigeria, they wanted 6 states. There were 3 states. They wanted 6. And in those 6 states, the northern region will remain 1, the eastern region will remain 1, but the western region will be divided into 4. That's how devious and demonic the plan was before they even had the summit meeting in Nigeria. After that meeting now, they can't go UK. They can't get to UK because they wanted 17 states right there and then, and they had already named all the states. That's the document they went to present to the British, contrary to the agreement they had before leaving Lagos. And those are the people that call you traitors. Because nothing much has changed. LP, unless of course Peter Obi gets out of that place, is going to become an Igbo party just like NCNC became it. I mean, it was already becoming an Igbo party before they hijacked it, before they started having the power tussle amongst themselves in LP. And the mindset of NCNC is alive and well in LP. Or let me put it this way, it's alive and well in Obedient Movement. It's ethnic, it's built on propaganda, it's violent, even though the violence in this one is not physical. They will go after you, go after your job, go after your family. It's the same thing as Zik's movement. It's the same ideology of everybody must go down for me to win. It's the same thing. And they're the ones that are going to call you a tribalist and a bigot. So what they wanted in 1957 was the creation of 17 states which were named by them. The argument of the NCNC was that the smaller the states, the better for the federal unity of Nigeria. Listen, this federal unity of Nigeria is the same argument they've been having all this while. It's not for the benefit of Nigeria, it's for themselves. And like I said the last time, that one of the things I've noticed is that the NCNC came in right now, essentially what they do, they have short-term thinking. Look at their policies. Look at the documents we've been reading so far. Is there any moderator? Please let me mute that Savannah clown, because I don't think this is not the place for you. You need to go and meet your mates. I was going to tell you to go and meet my nephew, but he's smarter than you and he's younger. But you are just a retard. How can you come and be insulting Yoruba people? We are discussing NCNC, MPC, and what your people, and yes, Igbo people. You guys do short-term thinking. And anything that is long-term from you historically is to destroy other groups, and that's why you always fail. And thank you, Kubu on YouTube. Thank you for what you just typed there. It says Azikwe's engagement, or I think what you meant was Azikwe engaged in the politics of I want to read. I was going to actually read it though. Who will be the first person to castigate the government and insult Tinubu even today? Thank you, Adeji. Zero-sum game. No matter what the government does, they go against it. It's not because what he's doing is wrong. It's because they're not the ones doing it. And by the time they're done, they'll tell you that they're doing it for national unity. Thank you for retyping it. Azikiwe engaged in politics of sabotage. That's true. indigenous status bill said was of federal unity. Anything they say, they'll use federal unity to paint it. Is the paint that they put on it so that you don't really see the real idea behind what they're saying. It was my view that in the existing economic, financial, and administrative conditions of Nigeria, the creation of 17 states will make nonsense of federalism and indeed would amount to a backdoor reversion to a unitary system. Each of the 17 states would be so weak, which is what Azikiwe has always wanted. As the NCNC said in 1950 and 1951, which we read earlier. By the way, they had some Yoruba push out in federal unity with them all. Papa says here, the 17 states will be so weak that it would perforce be subordinated to the federal government in practically all the major functions which the regions now performed. In that event, the so-called states would be nothing more and nothing less than glorified local government authorities. I don't know how people can be like this. Speaking for myself and for the Action Group delegation, by the way, the reason I'm speaking like this is because, you know, they tried it they talked about it in the 50s, early 50s. People said no. They tried it again in late 50s. People said no. They eventually did it in 66. That thing they did in 66 is why we are where we are today. I'm not saying that the only problem or everybody has something of Nigeria, but I'm saying that decision that was taken in the wasn't it the same early 60s that Malaysia pushed out what's the word now, expelled Singapore. It was then, I mean, you are just starting out, you make mistakes. Structure because you want to make it favor your people. Now your people are the one crying to change the structure now. And the reason is because the only reason you're asking for it to change now is because it's not working, it's not benefiting you. As long as even this terrible structure, quote unquote, begins to benefit you, everybody will keep quiet again. In other words, you don't really want a better system. You just want what makes you guys prosper. Even if it's at the expense of others, you don't mind. Speaking for myself and for the Action Group delegation, I advocated the incorporation in our constitution of provisions for the creation of states in the future and the immediate creation of the COR state, the Midwest state, and the Middle Belt state. By the way, the only person of those three who moved for COR states to be created in 1957, for Midwest to be created in 1957 and for Middle Belt to be created in 1957 was Awo. And that is why if you are from the Midwest and you're always joining Igbo to insult Awo, you are not thinking straight. There's something wrong with you. It's probably ignorance or stupidity, but I want to believe it's ignorance. You don't know. When everybody said no state will be created, the ones who said create that state was Awo, including the Midwest. You know, people do this thing, especially from Delta states. And I know why they are doing it. They are doing it because of Ishekiri. That one is another topic on its own. We're going to get there. Only person of the nonsense. You're not serious. And I see a lot of Urobo, Isoko, Ijo trying to join Igbo and be like, say, oh, we are all together. And they say, oh, look at the West side. You don't understand the history. One night of myself, I'm going to get to what happened with Willings Commission. Then we'll talk about how education was done, how the services that were provided. But they got it because they were part of the Western region. Benin, Edo, even the Jaws at the time. Anybody we want that's if you are in the, it wasn't a perfect region, but it was fair. The region was fair to all. For instance, And even then, they say 25% of the budget allocated to them. People went to school in Yoruba land. Even people went to school. Igbo people in Western region were going to school free, while Igbo people in the Eastern region could not go to school free of charge. Your audio is better with TikTok. I switched from YouTube. I don't know what's happening. And I apologize. If you're on YouTube, I really apologize for this. Dr. Badjo, thank you for everything. But maybe we need to change the platform. We'll find alternatives later. But thank you for being here. Folks will be able to go to free schools in Western region, but they couldn't do that in the Eastern region. And when the Eastern region tried, they stopped it within 1 year. We'll get to all of those things. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that of all the three leaders at the time, Awo was the only one who supported creation of new states when 1957. So a lot of people come with this nonsense of Yoruba people did this, Yoruba people did that. Please remind them of these basic things. And these things are verifiable. It's not something like, I don't feel like give you. This one is not I don't feel like give you. I can give you the sources. I preferred 4 principles which I thought should govern constitutional provisions. The new states may be created in the Federation of Nigeria, but no new state shall be created within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be created by the junction of 2 or more states or parts of the state without the consent signified by a 2/3 majority of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as the federal parliament. Number 2, no ethnic or racial group in any existing region should be split in the process of creating new states. Number 3, any ethnic group which does not elect to join a proposed state should be permitted to stay out and remain with the original state, which was one thing for Ishekiri people. As we go, we are going to see this thing. This was why Ishekiri people wanted to be part of Ondo in 1963. They did not vote to join Midwest, which was why the NCNC deposed their king. We're going to revisit this one later. A lot of people have said it, how that Midwest thing was rigged. I have a letter from First Ozokotiebo to then Sosadebe. When we get there, we'll read that as well. So it says, any ethnic group which does not elect to join a proposed state should be satisfy the test of viability. We've talked about that several times. In regards to the proposal, and only these 3 should, for reasons which I gave. First, the demand for the 3 was much older in order of time than that of the new ones, and had formed part of election issues in the areas concerned. With a measure enunciated by me should not be applicable. The reason for this was obvious. If the 3 states were to be created immediately, their creation must not be made subject to the consent of the regional governments, 2 of whom, the northern and eastern, were unyielding and unconditionally opposed to the carving out of the new states. I'll explain. They were unconditionally opposed to the carving out of the new states from their respective jurisdictions. Furthermore, I thought it was ridiculous to suggest, as the NCNC had done, that the question of creating new states, whether 3 or 17, could and should be tackled at all, much less settled with the finality at the conference table. The delimitation of the boundaries of the new states, the determination of the viability of each of them, the ascertainment of the wishes of the people, and so on and so forth, were matters which only a high-powered commission could investigate and report upon. Somebody says, I wonder why Shekiri kept quiet for so long, because they were surrounded by Otapoju enemy law, ye pari pao. there's something that I was said here, and I think it's important to read something. I want to quickly check one book. Mumbo, which one is that? This one, I think. 1 second. I will mention that certain people have used state creation, let me read the way he said it. Mumbo. That some people had used state creation as an issue, right, in order to win elections. In other words, they promised people, right, or the smaller regions that, listen, if you vote for us, we are going to support you having your own state. Mumbo, there's something I'm looking for. I found it. So I'm going to read from Between the Ethnic and the National by Remi Adekoya. It says here, Bello and NPC were categorical on the issue of separatism in their region. They would not part with an inch of northern territory. Southern politicians were more ambiguous. On the one hand, Southern nationalists generally supported the reorganization of Nigeria into a larger number of states based on criteria of cultural and linguistic affinities. On the other hand, once their parties captured control of their regions, the NCNC and AG leaders were reluctant for new states to emerge from territory under their control. Instead, they actively supported separatist tendencies in their rivals' regions. In response to minority agitations, a Minorities Commission was established in 1957 to address the issue of minority fears regarding their fate. It's taking us far. We're going to go back to that. I don't want to read that book yet, the Minority Commission's report. Because when we get there, you also hear why people wanted to leave the Western region, which is fair. And then you also hear how they wanted to leave other regions as well. But the point is that, okay, I found what I'm looking for. Mumbo. Commission recommended, I'll come back to it later, but let's just, since we are talking, I already started reading it already. In response to minority agitations, a Minorities Commission was established in 1957 to address the issue of minority fears regarding their fate in an independent Nigeria and their demands for state creation, or for new state creation. After touring Nigeria and weighing the arguments and counter-arguments of various representatives and community leaders, the Commission recommended against the creation of new states, arguing this could foster nationwide fragmentation along ethnic lines, asserting it was unclear whether majority opinion favored creating new states in the areas involved, and questioning the viability of new states. Instead, it recommended constitutional safeguards guaranteeing minority rights and a strongly federal system of government where no single, I'm sorry, it's long, I'll explain, where no single ethnic nationality could dominate. Bello's NPC welcomed the decision, again a favorable one for them. It left the north intact, larger than the two other regions combined. Awolowo's AG, which had wanted the roughly 500,000 Yorubas living in the northern region to join their kith and kin in the west, was predictably critical of the outcome. Azikiwe's NCNC, also unwilling to see the east lose any territory, said independence was the overriding goal and state creation could be deferred for the moment. The people who wanted 17 states in 1957, by the following year, they said they can even leave the state creation until later. There's one more thing I'm looking for. If I find it, I'm going to read it. Okay, I think it's here. It's that same book. I'm just looking for the page. Okay. Oh, I found it. I think I found it. I think so. It's in different pages, but so this one again, I'm reading Between the Ethnic and the National by Remi Adekoya. It says here, in the early 1960s, as Nigeria's symbolic number one citizen, Azikiwe actively strove to think intra-Nigerian boundaries, asserting a sense of national we already existed in the minds of the country's inhabitants. However, by 1964, undeniable inter-ethnic conflicts prompted him to shift course and admit this was not yet the case. In 1965, he admitted there was no sense of national we-ness, asserting tribalism had triumphed. His preferred solutions for accommodating Nigeria's diversity shifted from ethnofederalism between 1943 and 1951, which means Igbo state, Yoruba state. That was what he said between 43 and 51. Then between 51 and 53, he went to Unitarianism, and then back to federalism 1953, from 1953 onwards. Azikiwe's boundary narratives can be characterized as an ambiguous combination of political opportunism and wishful thinking. Awolowo rather consistently constructed and emphasized thick and divisive intra-Nigerian boundaries in the spheres of culture, language, political institutions, and behavioral patterns, focusing especially on interregional north-south differences. So what you see essentially is this. When it came to the idea of states, the only person that was actually for everybody being okay was Awo. And the only region that was for everybody being okay was the Western region. On board. After a long spell, by the way, the NCNC was saying that they should create the 17 states there. Meanwhile, you didn't talk about consulting the people. Again, I think it's something from the East, because when they were going to create Biafra, they didn't really consult people. The Eastern Consultative Forum was a rubber stamp assembly. We know that much. And I can suggest 2 books, or recommend 2 books. Sunset in Biafra by Leche Amadi, On a Darkling Plain by Ken Saro-Wiwa. It wasn't about what the people wanted, it was about what the Igbos wanted. And I'll even say this, it wasn't about, even so much about all the Igbos. It was primarily Ojukwu and the Nnewi clique. And then they now had the intellectuals in the universities to join them. Those three combination of those 3 groups, rather, Dalondale. The Igbo people just followed those 3. Ojukwu on his own is a group, Abi. Let's just say those 2 groups, Ojukwu and the Nnewi clique, and then the Igbo intellectuals, who were pushing him. You must have Biafra, you must have Biafra. The Igbo people did not just wake up to say they wanted a different nation. They were told and they believed it. And now they still sing it, thinking it was their idea. It was never their idea. But you know what it is. After a long spell of spirited and heated debate, which lasted for some days, it was agreed that a commission should be appointed. The terms of reference of the commission were agreed upon only after a protracted and nerve-wracking negotiation. About 3 different drafts were made by the Secretary of State, Mr. Lennox Boyd. It was the 3rd draft that was accepted as a compromise. I did not very much like it. I did not very much like it, but Action Group delegates from the minority areas thought the commission would afford them a forum for ventilating their grievances, and that having regard to the facts at their disposal, they very much hoped to win. In 1957, a commission of inquiry known popularly as the Willing Commission and officially as the commission appointed to inquire into the affairs of the minorities and the means of allaying them was appointed by the Secretary of State, and its terms of reference were as follows. Number 1, to ascertain the facts about the fears of minorities in any part of Nigeria and to propose means of allaying those fears, whether well or ill-founded. Number 2, to advise what safeguards should be included for this purpose in the Constitution of Nigeria. Number 3, if but only if no other solution seems to be, I'll take that again. Number 3, if but only if no other solution seems to the Commission to meet the case, then as a last resort, to make detailed recommendations for the creation of 1 or more new states, and in that case, A, to specify the precise area to be included in such state or states, B, to recommend the governmental and administrative structure most appropriate for it, and C, to assess whether any state recommended will be viable from an economic and administrative point of view, and what the effect of its creation would be on the region or regions from which it will be created and on the federation. Number 4, to report its findings and recommendations to the Secretary of State for the colonies. The commission came, one second please. The commission came, made its investigation, and submitted a report in which my first reaction I described as bad and astonishing. Let's do like this. I'm thinking to myself, by the way. Oh, sorry, one second. One second, please. So I'm getting some sound. Just a second, please. Sorry about that. Light issues. We had to switch, but we're back. Where were we? Yes, I was saying that I think we probably should read this before reading the commission. The report itself, so that it gives us like a basis for understanding what we're about to read. But this is long, shall Jesus is Lord. I think it would be worth it. I don't want us to jump into the document itself without having. So I want Papa's book to be the basis for understanding what we're about to read. So when we get there, it becomes easier. But the book is also here. The reason is because when we get to that book, I want to actually explore what the agitation of the minorities were in the Western region, in the Eastern region, in the Northern region. All right, but let's finish this chapter before we go into that book. I think that way we'll not just be all over the place. We'll actually understand what it is. All right, let's go on. At the beginning of the 1958 Constitutional Conference, the position taken by the Action Group NPC and NCNC on the issue of states, and hence on the recommendation of the oh, I'm very fast, man. I have to slow down. At the beginning of the 1958 Constitutional Conference, the position taken by the Action Group NPC and NCNC on the issue of states, and hence on the recommendations of the Minorities Commission, were different from those from which they gave battle in 1957. The Action Group rejected the recommendations of the Commission in their entirety and demanded without any reservation the creation of the 3 proposed states. What was the recommendation? Let me just give you like a brief. The recommendation was that there should be no new states created before independence. Number 2, that they should have a mechanism to ensure that the minority rights were taken care of. Number 3, which is actually crazy, I found this one in this book by Olusegun Obasanjo, My Command. They said if they were going to give us more states, that would take us another 2 years to have independence. And knowing that a lot of people, at the time, wanted independence, they were like, no, don't worry, let's just get it. But before they did that, the Western region, even after the reports were released in 1958, the Western region insisted on the creation of new states. For the first time, it had the courage, that's AG, to tick off the NPC on the question of the proposed Middle Belt state. The action group submitted to the conference memoranda in which, among other things, it urged that provisions should be made in the constitution which will make it possible for new states to be created in the future. The NCNC as a party was more devious than ever. Oh, God. It accepted the recommendations of the Minorities Commission. You know what? I think we should read the recommendations. Even if we don't go deep into it, let's just read the recommendations. We just, 1 second please. Just read the recommendations. So that gives us an idea what the NCNC was supporting at the time. So there are many things. So there's police, there's regional police. This was when they said that the Nigerian police force should absorb the local police into themselves. Talks about uniform. No, let's move away from police. I want to go straight to fundamental human rights. Oh, this one, come over. Minority areas, the Benin province should be considered as a minority area, known as Edo area. So that Benin province will include Urobo division, but exclude Akoko, Edo, and Asaba. The Calabar province should be constituted as a minority area, known as the Calabar area, not regional. They're not giving them region status, they're just telling them to be a minority area. Then they said there'll be, then for the Yoruba people in Ilorin and Kaba, no change should be made in the boundary between the northern and western regions, except as a result of plebiscite. A plebiscite should be held only if there is general agreement at the conference, and that its outcome will be binding. And of course, they talk about Muslim laws. The one I'm looking for. 1 second, please. Okay. They concluded that on their own merit, separate states would not effectively address the expressed fears, so they should not be states. They talked about the fact that it's almost impossible to draw a clean boundary which does not create a fresh minority. Proposed states often become very small by the time it had been pared down to an area in which it was possible to assert with confidence what it desired. Then it said, the Commission considered the arguments of the Midwest states, which varies in proposed area and enthusiasm. They found no evidence of deliberate and vindictive discrimination or even culpable neglect by a Western regional government, noting that grievances were often exaggerated. Yeah, that's true, but that's everyone I'm looking for. You know what? The reason I'm moving very fast is because if I get into this thing, we will not stop. The book is big, and the information in that book, there are a lot, and I would want us to get as much as possible. Essentially, the point is that they didn't want to create any new states. They said if you're going to create more states, you're going to have to wait for like 2 more years, at least, in order to have before we had independence. Talked about the fact that even the created new states, there will be issues of new minorities in the states they create. So all those things they put out there essentially was to say there will be no state creation. So let's go back to Papa's book. The action group submitted to the conference memoranda in which, among other things, it urged that provisions should be made in the constitution which would make it possible for new states to be created in the future. The NCNC as a party was more devious than ever. It accepted the recommendations of the Minority Commission and was opposed to the creation of any state before independence, the Midwest not excepted. It was also opposed to the consideration at the conference of any provisions in the Constitution which would enable states to be created in the future. In other words, the Eastern region said, never should we have more states. After independence, the NCNC argued a constituent assembly should be convened which would deliberate and decide on all the outstanding problems of the country, including the question of new states. It was interesting to note that at the 1958 conference, the NCNC was hand in glove with the NPC. As a matter of fact, the NCNC did not disguise its fawning on... Sorry, I'll take that again. It was interesting to note that at the 1958 conference, the NCNC was hand in glove with the NPC. As a matter of fact, the NCNC did not disguise its fawning and unrelieved subordination to the NPC on all matters. This, in my view, was responsible for the unashamed volte-face of the NCNC on the issue of the Midwest state, the immediate reaction of which it had demanded in 1957, as well as during the inquiry by the Minorities Commission. The NPC also accepted the recommendations of the Minorities Commissions and was as adamant as ever in its opposition to the creation of any state. It was, however, prepared to support the proposals made in the memoranda by the Action Group and the United Kingdom delegations concerning provisions for the creation of states after independence. Its support was subject to the proviso that such provisions should be so stringent as to make the creation of new states a very difficult proposition. When the Commission's report came up, the Commission we're talking about here is the Willing Commission. The Willing Commission. W-I-L-L-I-N-K. When the Commission's report came up for consideration, it proved to be the most controversial matter dealt with by the 1958 conference. It was debated at great length and with unparalleled vigor by all the Nigerian delegations. On one side were the Action Group and the representatives of the minority groups, and ranged against them on the other side were the NCNC and the NPC, adroitly supported by the United Kingdom delegation. You know what I've learned in this whole thing? Anytime when they support you before independence, so if they support the group they are supporting before independence is the group that is wrong. Anytime the colonial government supports one group against the other in Nigeria's political history before this pre-independence, the group they are supporting is the wrong group. So here you have the AG and the minorities on one hand, then you have the NCNC and NPC on the other hand, but they were supported by the United Kingdom delegation. In the course of the grueling and long-drawn discussion, the Secretary of State, Mr. Lennox Boyd, made a statement in which he attempted to impale the Action Group on the horns of a dilemma. I quote his words as recorded in the report of the 1958 conference. The Secretary of State said that the conference seemed to have two choices. On the one hand, to abandon the request for independence in 1960, and instead to put the test of new states to the test. I'll take that again. The Secretary of State said that the conference seemed to have two choices. On the one hand, to abandon the request for independence in 1960, and instead to put the question of new states to the test at the next elections or at a series of plebiscites next year, followed by a fresh conference thereafter to consider whether new states should be created and, if so, what provision for them was needed. And on the other hand, to accept that if there was to be early independence, no new states could be created either now or as a result of next year's elections, so that the present structure of the Federation would continue in existence at least until after the strains of independence had been taken. But he recognized that the present regional boundaries and number of regions could not be regarded as standing for all time, and accordingly commended to the conference proposals, which he tabled for a procedure to be included in the Constitution for Independence for effecting boundary changes and creating new regions. What is he saying here? That if you insisted on creating new states, there will be no independence. This was already 1958. There was going to be an election in 1959. Right? So people are already looking forward to that election. So he's saying here, if you guys insist We will have no independence, but we can have the states, and then we'll see how it goes. It says, instead to put the question of new states to the test at the next elections or at a series of plebiscites next year, so they're going to vote on, let the people vote on it, which means essentially you will still be under colonial government for a while, which might be 2 years or 3 or 4. Some people have said 2. That's what you find in Olusegun Obasanjo's book, My Command. Between the end of the 1957 conference and the beginning of that of 1958, the spokesmen of the minorities had become more insistent on their demands. They wanted the new states created before the grant of independence. They even went as far as to declare that unless these states were created, they would oppose the grant of independence. Their slogan was "No states, no independence." Since the Action Group was the only advocate of the creation of states before independence, there was no doubt that Mr. Lennox Boyd was determined to disarm or disarray my delegation on the issue. He went about it in a most skillful and remorseless manner. If the Action Group delegation opted for the postponement, I'll take that again. If the Action Group delegation opted for the postponement of the date of independence, it will be discredited forever and ever in the eyes of Nigerians and of the world. If, on the other hand, we insisted on the attainment of independence by Nigeria in 1960, then the issue of creating new states would have to be postponed until after that independence. I had a tough time in rallying the leaders of the minorities in my delegation to my unmistaken standpoint. Cablegrams poured into them and to me from supporters of the proposed states in Nigeria, calling upon us to press for the postponement of the date of independence so that new states might be created. I, however, stood absolutely immovable. As far as I was concerned, there could be no question of postponing the date of independence. In my presidential address to the Action Group Congress delivered at Calabar on Monday, 28 April 1958, I had said, "You have probably noticed that two basic assumptions underlie my thoughts and ideas and the views which I have expressed this." I'll take that again. You have probably noticed that two basic assumptions underlie my thoughts and ideas and the views which I have expressed in this address. First, I have assumed the inviolability of Nigeria's unity. Secondly, I have assumed that Nigeria will become independent before or by April 2nd, 1960. There are a number of well-meaning and undoubted nationalists who, incensed by the dishonest tactics of some of our political leaders, have been compelled to doubt the future unity of Nigeria and to declare they would not support independence in 1960 unless the COR state, the Midwest state, and the Middle Belt state are created and regional boundaries are adjusted before then. My appeal to these outraged nationalists is that whatever we do, we must on no account retreat from our legitimate and long-standing demand for independence. Nor must we destroy the great heritage of a united Nigeria, which the British will bequeath to us on their surrender of power. Let us all therefore hope and pray that God Almighty may guide the resumed conference to come to those conclusions which we know are the only right ones for the peace, happiness, and prosperity of the diverse peoples of this country. If the resumed conference fails in this regard, the fight for the creation of states and the adjustment of boundaries will have to be resumed by us with increased intensity. And I have no doubt at all in my mind that if our cause is just, it will, with hard work and faith in God, triumph in due course of time. Please, let's power tap on Twitter. This thing is showing, on TikTok. This thing is showing inactivity. That was Awo in Calabar on 20th April 1958. I mean, it's self-explanatory, so I don't have to explain. In regard to Mr. Lennox Boyd's statement quoted above, I pointed out at the conference that if the choices were indeed alternative as stated by him, the preference of the Action Group and its allies was clear and unequivocal. We took our stand unwaveringly on the demand for independence on 2nd April 1960. It was on record I said that the action group was the spearhead of the demand for a target date for Nigeria's independence. When we first made the demand, we were ridiculed and vilified by many people. But now that our dream was about to become a reality, we were filled with joy. I expressed the belief that from the hints which Mr. Lennox Boyd had dropped, 1960 would be the year of Nigeria's independence. I declared, however, that the choices open to the conference were not the alternatives as stated by Mr. Lennox Boyd. I argued that it was possible, if the will were there, for the three proposed states to be created before the date of independence in 1960. After all the arguments which could be urged for and against the creation of new states had been advanced and exhausted, the recommendations of the Minorities Commission were accepted by the conference with minor modifications. In view of the alternative choices placed before the conference by Mr. Lennox Boyd, and which were obviously directed against my delegation, I felt myself under compulsion, and thank God I succeeded in carrying all my colleagues with me to make the best of a bad situation in order to ensure that Nigeria attains to independence in 1960. But the nearer we are to the day of Nigeria's independence, the firmer I became in my conviction that the remedies proposed by the Willing Commission are inappropriate and inefficacious, and that Britain has let down the minority ethnic groups in Nigeria by the refusal of Her Majesty's government to create the three proposed states before its handing over of power. This is the man that people are insulting now. Before I proceed to deal with the main recommendations of the Commission, I would like to make some preliminary remarks. In the first place, the minority groups in each region, rightly or wrongly, accuse the government of the region of oppression, victimization, and tyranny. They fear that their sufferings will be aggravated after Nigeria shall have attained independence, and the restraining and liberalizing influence of the British government has been withdrawn. Consequently, the Nigerian minorities, particularly those of northern Nigeria, contemplate the attainment of sovereignty by Nigeria on 1st October 1960 with a feeling of trepidation. At page 87, paragraph 2 of its report, the Commission itself observes as follows. In each region, we came to the conclusion that on its merits, a separate state would not provide a remedy. I read it earlier from the book, but this is not from our book. It says here, Mombo, please on TikTok, please don't stop our tapping. Thank you very much. 101k likes. Let me clap for everybody. We have tried. I've tried. Now we're looking forward to you to clap for your video. All right, let's clap for everybody. Thank you. Thank you for 101, but let's take it up, please. All right. Thank you very much. In each region, this is from the Willing Commission report itself, right? It says here, in each region, we came to the conclusion that on its own merits, a separate state would not provide a remedy for the fears expressed. We were clear all the same that there remained a body of genuine fears and that the future was regarded with real apprehension. Back to Papa. This is one of the findings of the Commission, and I am strongly of the opinion that by failing to create the three proposed states before independence, we have omitted to do the one and only thing that would have given the minority ethnic groups a feeling of security in a new and free Nigeria. It is Aristotle who says that courage is the facing of a known danger for a noble purpose. I admit that independence for Nigeria involves many risks, and that all the citizens of the country must be prepared to meet those risks. After independence, we will have to stand on our own and rely on our own resources. The unifying force, the cement, to borrow Lord Chandos' expression, which had either been supplied by the United Kingdom government, will be removed and will have to be replaced by new virtues of our own, which must be capable of keeping all the diverse elements of the country together in mutual trust and harmony, and with a common national purpose. I don't know if we see how, if we eventually got that national purpose, Sha. Internal and external problems of a new complexion and variety will press themselves upon us, sometimes demanding an urgent and always a judicious solution. Our government might be good and benevolent, or it might be bad and tyrannical. In all the circumstances of a new and independent Nigeria, we must be prepared to fend for ourselves. It will be idle and a negation of our sovereignty for us as a nation or as individual citizens to look to Britain or to any other country for succor or for the solution of our problems. Whilst political independence for our country, like all great ventures, involves risks, it is nevertheless a noble purpose. The yearning for independence is a natural instinct embedded in the breast of man by nature. Had it been natural for man to live in slavery or under the domination of others with perfect contentment, the human race would have long ago been exterminated. As we approach independence, however, we must not mistake foolhardiness for courage. While it is necessary for human evolution to take risks, it does not follow that steps should not be taken to minimize such risks, so as to reduce the dangers of the venture on which we propose to embark. When Sir John Hunt, Sir Edmund Hillary, and their associates were invited to make an attempt on Mount Everest, they knew they were taking risks because others before them had failed and perished in the attempt. Nevertheless, they took all the precautions which common sense and modern science dictated. Furthermore, their aim was not merely to climb to the top of the mountain, but in the process to acquire information which would enable them to make a valuable contribution to knowledge. Similarly, I am of the opinion that as we approach and enter into independence, we must take such steps as prudence and foresight dictate to minimize the risks involved in a noble venture. In this connection, we must never lose sight of the fact that the attainment of independence is not an end in itself. It's a noble means to a great end. It must be our aim to maintain the existing unity of the country, guarantee individual liberty for the people, promote harmonious relations between the different groups, nurture the democratic way of life, and generate wholesome influences on other parts of the world. It has been said that bad self-rule is preferable to benevolent foreign rule. Well said, but we must not on any account, deliberately, carelessly, or spitefully do anything which to all intents and purposes is bound to operate to the prejudice of good government. In ushering in a new and free Nigeria, it is imperative that we take those steps which wisdom and the empirical facts of history proclaim to be essential and prerequisites to harmony and happiness among the diverse peoples of our land. In the second place, I have been accused by my political opponents of supporting the creation of new states in order to catch votes from the minority areas with a view to winning the last federal elections. I make no apologies for aspiring to win the federal elections. This is a legitimate objective which I strove and I am still striving after. But my support for the creation of new states is not motivated by a mere desire to attract votes. As has been amply demonstrated in the last chapter, my support springs from a long-standing and deep-rooted conviction. With me, federalism and the creation of more states is an article of faith. Thank you very much, OK Mighty, on YouTube for the gifts. I really appreciate it. And it's quite good that on YouTube people can also give gifts now. So thank you very much for your support. And on TikTok as well. And what was happening? Oh, so this person has been here a year. Thank you for responding to him. But I think his 1 minute of fame has come to an end. Let's get back to the reading. Now to the report of the Minorities Commission. I will only refer to two features which I consider to be crucial and fundamental. You know what? To make this thing exciting, let's stop for now and go to the report itself. Then we'll come back to this. I know we've been reading a lot, and it's intentional. And I know reading can be boring sometimes, but it's still intentional. That thing they used to say, if you want to hide something from a white, from a black man, put it in that book. We are changing it for us at least. So we are all of this thing I'm reading, we are reading together. And of course, you can always come back to this video to listen all over again. I'm going to read the other book. We're coming back to this. Why did they really want to break out of our regions? One of the things I like about how Awo talked about it was that he said, and let me read to you what he said before we even leave the book totally. Excuse me. This is what Awo said. It says, minority groups in each region rightly or wrongly accuse the government of the region of oppression, victimization, and tyranny. One second. I'm going to do a quick. I was going to do Western region, then Eastern region later, and then maybe Midwest, Middle Belt, but we'll just do everything together. Just give me a second. Thank you. Okay, Mighty on TikTok. It is one person. Thank you. Thank you. Glad to see you on TikTok. Thank you very much. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to do. Let's start with Western region. Let's start at home. At least if we talk about ourselves, you know that this is no agenda here. Number one issue the Midwest people or people in Benin and Delta provinces or Warri provinces at the time, the number one issue they had was that they looked at the way things were going, that they had the fear of perpetual Yoruba domination, which is valid. The Yoruba people were the majority in the region. And so the way they were looking at it, no matter how you cut or dice it, these people would always emerge as the Oga. So they had perpetual Yoruba, the fear of perpetual Yoruba domination. Minorities in the Midwest believed that the AG was based, on a secure Yoruba majority. In other words, as no matter what they did, a lot of them joined NCNC. As a matter of fact, most of the seats in Benin province and Delta province actually were NCNC seats. But no matter what they did, the AG would always win because they had a secure stance in Yoruba land. And they talked about epithets like Kobo Kobo, which is quite interesting because, again, see, I want to tell you everything they said so that it won't be like we're talking about what others. So this is what they say about Yoruba people, that they used to call them Kobo Kobo. You know what? Let me just read the book. So there's a website that has the summary, but I don't want to read the summary. I want to read the book itself. We are concerned with minorities that are permanent. In the Western region, there are two kinds, ethnic and religious. We shall deal with this in the chapter. It was perhaps inevitable that the apprehensions of minorities should be formulated with some difficulty and often expressed in the vaguest of general terms. The fear most generally expressed to us was that the people of the Midwest would always be dominated by the Yoruba majority in the rest of the region. It was the Midwesterners' contention that the Action Group Party was based on a secure Yoruba majority and that there was therefore no prospect of a change. And they were afraid it was going to affect their culture, their language, things like that, right? And that's why they would rather have their own state. For now, I'm not going to tell you whether it was good or bad. Let's just take it together. As you now go and start hearing the one that you now begin to ask, are we all okay? But let's continue. So they had that fear, which I think, to be honest, I think is valid. No matter what they did, they would not have been able to get anything out of Yoruba land without siding with the Yoruba majority, which is plain common sense. And so I agree with them on that one. So they talked about disrespect, being called kobo kobo. And the reason I laughed about that is because everybody has something for Yoruba people as well, right? People have different names for different groups, you know. And to be honest, they're part of Yoruba. They're part of Western region at the time that were late to civilization. So, but again, that doesn't justify being called, you know, kobo kobo or something like that. Then there's also the thing about some people assuming that Benin was part of Yoruba land, ignoring other inhabitants like those. Sorry, they had publications that equated Yoruba land with Western region, ignoring other inhabitants like those from Benin. So let me read down very quickly. It says an example of the sensitivity of the Midwest. Let me go back a bit before I read that one. It says here, the actions of the regional government, they argued, pointed to a deliberate intention of obliterating the separate language, culture, and institutions of the Midwest, or at least on the most favorable interpretation of fostering tendencies, which would have this result, while they took no steps to preserve the legacy of the Benin Empire. So the Benin considered itself to be an empire. Again, this empire nonsense everybody is using to talk in. Number one, Benin was not an empire. Number two, the last time Benin was great was in 1890. Is it 93 or 97? Sorry, let me get that date. When the 1897, I was right. 1897. That was the last time, you know. So all this empire thing is a joke. But I mean, it's fine. It's fine. You know, when this whole thing started, I read it last week. The action group was warning the rest of the Midwest that Edo people will dominate and things like that. They changed their mind later, but let's continue. So they said an example of the sensitivity of the Midwest and of a certain tactlessness at the headquarters region, we may quote a matter which, considered in isolation, would be unimportant. A pamphlet was produced by the Western Nigeria Information Service, which described the maize presented to the new parliament at Ibadan on the 22nd of November 1957. This pamphlet referred to traditional Yoruba patterns and to 4 ceremonial swords in silver, symbolic of the authority of chiefs in Yoruba land, with other references to Yoruba traditions worded as though Yoruba land was synonymous with the Western region and there were no other inhabitants in Yoruba land. In fact, we were assured that the swords in question are as much symbolic of the authority of chiefs in Benin as in the Yoruba country, and the Olu of Warri's representative at one of our hearings had just such a sword carried by him. What this Oyinbo did not realize is that even the Benin that has those swords also got it from Yoruba land. And the Olu of Warri that has those swords also got it from Yoruba land. So, for instance, the Adan Eben that they have in Benin is from Yoruba land. Again, let's just take it one by one. You start discovering the ridiculousness of the things they said. Like the first thing they said, I agree with that one perfectly. Like, it's true. Yoruba were the majority, so they will always have the upper hand. So I get that one. Every other thing I think is a joke. But that's just me. For instance, they talked about the fears of politicization of the police. They did not say the police were politicized, though. They were just afraid that it is possible because, you know, Action Group could use the police to intimidate them. What else? No, I'm trying to jump to the one that actually I found it. Let me read that police thing very well because I don't think it's fair for me to just, you know, rush over it. In the Western region, okay, so it says there is regional legislation banning the wearing of uniforms and badges by unorganized by unorganized bodies But we heard a number of occasions of the arrival of cars, usually Land Rovers or Jeeps, bearing the Action Group Party, symbol of a palm tree, from which men with sticks emerged from the intention of influencing a meeting or an individual, but at least the threat of physical force. In the course of public evidence, the clearest description of an incident of this kind arose not in the Midwest, but in relation to a meeting called by the Muslim League. This meeting was visited by a regional minister. So, this is what I noticed from them is something will happen somewhere else, and not be afraid that it may happen to them as well. So that's why they wanted to have their own region. I'm coming. I'm trying to. Listen, the book is big, so I'm trying to just, the one that I think is quite funny is the one on Ogboni, and that's the one I'm trying to get into. The Ogboni fraternity. So the reformed Ogboni fraternity, not Ogboni, reformed Ogboni fraternity. By the way, let me just take this opportunity to also explain something. The Ogboni is not the same thing as the reformed Ogboni fraternity. The reformed Ogboni fraternity was created by the Archdeacon Ogunbiyi, and it's something of the Yoruba answer to Freemasonry. It's not the traditional Ogboni. Let me first put it out there. So, because you see a lot of this mix up with ROF. ROF is not the Ogboni or Ogboni gong 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 gong. This one is so there was a particular period in Nigeria, you could say Nigerian, you could also say Yoruba Christianity, where a time will come when we're going to discuss Christianity in Yoruba land. I'll go into the details of all of these things. But there was a time that a lot of people started to question the Europeanization of the people based on the fact that they were becoming Christians. And the people that questioned these things were priests themselves. People like Mojalak Bebi, people like Henry Carr, people like Ogunbiyi, even people like Ajayi Crowther himself. People are questioning this Europeanization of the person, the thought, the actions, the music, the organizations, even the liturgy of the church, right? And they started to look for ways to, even Fela's grandfather, J.J. Ransom Kuti, they were not trying to find a way to create something similar, but they could find in their own cultural experience. So, for instance, you have people. This book is inside. There's a man's name. He did a song, Mayokun. They had a song book called Mayokun. Hymn book that will be Yoruba song. The thing is, Yoruba music uses a different scale from European music or from, let's say, English, who gave us CMS. I don't know if you know music theory, but there's something called pentatonic scale. The Yoruba music is based on 5 notes, primarily. Although there's certain places you go to Yoruba land where you might find a 6 note, right? But generally speaking, we use 5 scales, just like the Chinese. Do, re, mi, sol, la. Now, the issue with the Oyibo is that their own notes are 7. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Then, of course, then do is repeated. The issue now is that there are certain things they will write, some of their songs, right? Because their own language, God bless you, Benro. That's the name I was looking for. Thank you, sir. My queen is by Reverend Ola Olude. Thank you. There's another person too, but thank you for giving us that name. So our language is very tonal. English language is not tonal. So if I say something like, the Lord bless you, or I say, the Lord bless you, the Lord bless you, the Lord bless you, is the same thing. In Yoruba land, if you sing something like, let me look for a good example. All the examples coming to me right now are the good examples. Anybody should help me. Let me see. All the examples coming to my head right now are the good ones. I'm looking for the bad one. Let's look for. There's a bad one that just came to my head right now, but if I say it, it will be like an insult to an entire town, and I'm trying not to insult anybody. Those ones went to write anthem using Oyibo scale, and the thing sounds like CMS hymn. The point is, anybody knows any? A mighty fortress is our God. Use hand of God. Which hand of God? I know a mighty fortress, but me more Yoruba. I can't believe this. The funny thing is, I know a lot of these things, so anyway, the point is that if you sing a song in English language, let's say the notes, once you begin to have T, right, in Alpha, I don't want to go technical. Olo, would you please come up, because I don't. You have to say this thing. I don't know the one you're talking about. I get the point, but I don't know the one you're talking about, and I really would love an example here. So let me bring you up. Send a request, Olo. This is actually quite interesting. Do you mean hymns? Yes, Tiashi, I mean hymns, like a hymn that you have in Yoruba and then you have in English. Everything I want to say is actually very simple, though. You just find that example. And I don't want to use the one that's not popular. I want to use something that everybody can relate to. Ṣé bóyá lọ sí ṣọ́ọ̀ṣì kékeré ni mọ hymn ni? Kò tó fún wa ní hymn kankan bíbí. Take my life and let it be. Take my life and let it be consecrated unto you. Kí ni Yorùbá? Okay, Ijeshama wants to come and help me. I need somebody to help me at this point.
Mr. Busui.
Oh, I got the.
Share me lay. Ọkàn mi yìn ọba ọ̀run.
Wọ́tàwó sọ́tà dáríjì.
Yeah, the English version. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is the English version. Praise ye. Praise the King of heaven. You know.
You came to help me now.
Okay, Master Fluency.
No, yeah, as in you are stopping to now. Oh, sorry. Somebody has given me the answer on TikTok. I forgot follow.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Eshe. Or rock off ages. As soon as somebody came up, everybody started giving me ideas. Thank you. Rock of ages, clap for me. Praise my soul. So let me use this Yoruba one. I forgot follow. But you can even use the one that the gentleman brought up earlier. What was it back? Let me explain what I'm trying to say without having to find any song, because at this point I'll have to write notes to even get what the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that there are certain notes that you have in English language, in English music, or in English scale. Hello?
Yeah, in yes. In fact, the Lord bless you. Thanks for yẹn. Àtúntò sọ ní Yorùbá pé Ọlọ́run á ràn yín lọ́wọ́ àbí Ọlọ́run á ràn wá lọ́wọ́. Tí ràn yẹn bá change a little, ó máa di bí ràn, and it means entirely something else. Ọlọ́run á ràn yín lọ́wọ́.
Okay, so let's say that the Lord help you. Let's say what you're trying to say. Let's say help. You know, the word is help, Abby. So Ọlọ́run ràn yín lọ́wọ́ is help. So if we say something like exactly. The Lord help you. So if you sing that, you can put any notes on it, and thank you for even. In fact, I don't have to go very far. You have helped me now. This is even simpler. Okay, thank you. So let's say we say, the Lord help you. So but you can also sing, the Lord help you, regardless of how you regardless of what note you use. What you're saying is still the same, and the audience will get it. But if you say it in Yoruba like Olúwa ràn yín lọ́wọ́, Olúwa ràn yín lọ́wọ́, Olúwa ràn yín lọ́wọ́, the three things I just said right now don't mean the same thing. So ràn lọ́wọ́ la fẹ́ sọ o. Tá pé ràn ó send or ó ràn bígbà tó ń mu abẹ́rẹ́ àtòwó fi rán aṣọ. The point of the matter, the point I'm trying to make is that the Yoruba Christian musicians in the early 20th century started asking questions, even in from the late 19th century, to be honest. Like this thing where we're saying ràn lọ́wọ́ is sounding like we are sending God now, or sending him ó ràn lọ́wọ́, ó ràn ní ọwọ́, is you are stitching his hand. But what you are trying to say is that kó ràn mí lọ́wọ́, ó ràn lọ́wọ́, he has helped him. In fact, this is good. Thank you. You just helped my everything I'm trying to say. Fantastic. So the Lord help you. Kí Olúwa ràn ẹ́ lọ́wọ́, or kó ràn ọ́ lọ́wọ́, or the Lord helped him. Olúwa ràn ọ́ lọ́wọ́. But if you sing it as Olúwa ràn ọ́ lọ́wọ́, and you see it a lot in our hymns, by the way, it's still in some of the hymns, what happens is that you have changed the meaning of the word or what you had in mind. So when people hear that, they have to force themselves to try to get the understanding of what you're really trying to say. So what people did in the late 19th century and early 20th century was to begin to write songs using our own skill, which, like I said earlier, is the pentatonic scale. And you have people, for instance, like J.J. Rasom Kuti, who will now take a Yoruba folk song and then change the lyrics so that by the time people are singing it, it means something to them. And then the words are because, of course, our language is very tonal. Our language sounds like music. So when we sing in Yoruba language, so for instance, you have something like you hear Motini Jesu Mololuwa. It's easy to say that than to be saying Motini Jesu Mololuwa. Now it's easier for us to get like, okay, Jesu don't so. But back in the day, some of the words that people would use were not easily understandable, to them. So what I'm trying to, all of this to say that there was a wave in the late 19th century into the early 20th century of people domesticating their religion, especially Christianity. And in domesticating Christianity, it affected the music, it affected their dressing, it affected the works they were doing. A lot of work started in the early 20th century on Ifa, for instance, and most of it was done by Christian priests. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, where you have people like E.M. Lijadu doing fantastic work. I have two of his books, one on Ifa, the other one on Orunmila. They were trying to reclaim the Yoruba identity without losing the Christianity. And they did a fantastic job. And I am literally in the line of succession. What they did was to say, we are Christians, but we're Yoruba. We're not going to become Europeans. And so even when it came to music, to dressing, for instance, when you read the book, one of these, we're going to read the book by E.B. Ayondele, where he was, lambasting the Nigerians, especially Lagosians, who would wear coats, in this hot weather, and take afternoon tea as though they were British, trying to become Oyibo by force. At that time, it was changing, especially in the mindset of the priests. They were saying, we are Yoruba, even if we are Christians. That mindset was what gave rise to ROF. It's like, why should we be, I'm just using it as an example, I'm sure you get the point. Why should I be a Christian and I want to join an organization that has to be Freemasonry? Why should I join Freemasons? Why can't I just have something that is ours? For instance, I was not there in person, but I watched, it's almost like a service of ROF. They sang Anglican hymns now. If I'm able to find the video, I'll probably show it to you. They sang Anglican hymns in the ROF meeting. It's not Ogboni Ibile. It's like the best thing. Again, in Kotoba I'm not saying it's exactly Freemasonry. I'm just saying it's like our answer, which is the best answer, to be honest, or the best description. It's Yoruba people's answer to Freemasonry. So at the time, anything they saw abroad, they would look for a way to not just to domesticate it, but to create a local alternative so that You are not trying to become like Awon. For instance, in the beginning, we didn't have drums, like our local drums in churches. You couldn't. They brought in those drums. They brought in Boya Agbamole New Abi Sakara, which came later. No, not Sakara. Only Kobai Toman Shebi Fokon about Agbamole no. All of those things, were coming until like the 1920s. No, it's not syncretized though. It's not syncretized. If you pass near the lady in a Butemata, you will hear Christian songs during their music. Exactly. They sing from the hymns. ROF. Akuba, God bless you, Ayola. That's the word I was looking for. It's Akuba. All those things that came into the church later. By the way, many of those things also, the work did not stop. By the 1920s, with the rise of Kerubu, a lot more indigenous ideas came into the church. And the reason I said you cannot call this syncretism is this. Syncretism is bringing together two different religious beliefs. That's not what they did. What they did was to have a single religious belief, but introduce their own cultural experiences into the mix. So they're not bringing in another belief system. They're only bringing a different cultural expression of the same belief system. So it's not syncretism. So syncretism will be candomblé, will be Santeria in Brazil and Cuba. That would be syncretism, where you have Catholicism mixed with Orisha worship. But what they did, whether it was people like J.J. Ransom Kuti or Enrica or Mojala Gbebi or even Mozori Molade, what they did was to say, we are Christians. We don't have anything to do with our traditional religions anymore, but we are not going to jettison our culture. So they will sing Yoruba songs. They will intentionally preach in Yoruba language, sometimes to the consternation of the Oyibo missionaries. They did not care. That was why eventually by 1901, they had to break away and create the African church. And that's why I tell people that when you understand the evolution of Christianity in Yoruba land, all these foreign that people are always saying, you don't get it. Majority of the work we now have to rely on today was because of these people in the early 20th century, and the books they published in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s, and a lot in the 60s and 70s. And somebody asked on YouTube, what is the difference between ROF and Ogboni? ROF is an association. Ogboni is a cultural. See, Ogboni used to be the judicial arm of Yoruba government. The government of your town has Ogboni as an arm of government, like the judiciary of they are the ones who interpret laws. And they question kings as well. They provide checks and balances for the king. ROF, on the other hand, is open to everybody. Azikiwe was a member of ROF now. Azikiwe eventually took ROF to Onitsha. Now there's ROF in Onitsha. They had a meeting this year. I saw the picture. There is ROF in Onitsha. Zik was in ROF. Zik could never be in Ogboni. Ofe Jini. Like possible. Ogboni is cultural, traditional group. ROF as an association is similar to Freemason. Somebody says the current head of ROF is an Igbo person. And by the way, many of them also had this nationalistic thing. So they were Yoruba, but they also don't mind being Nigerian until, of course, Zik happened. But the point is that ROF was what they created and allowed different people to join. Now, why is this all important? Because one of the things that Midwest people, Benin people were saying at the time was that the Yoruba people were trying to make them Ogboni through ROF. ROF is not a lodge. All of them have lodges. ROF has lodges. Ogboni also has lodges now. So the lodge is a place where the group meets. It's not that the group is I don't know if you get what I'm saying. The ROF has lodges, but not like it's a lodge. I don't know if it's... I'm sure you get the point. So you have, for instance, all over Abeokuta, there are lodges. But enough of those lodges in Abeokuta are not even ROF. They are Ogboni. Of course, you see the signboard, sir, so you would be able to. Well, I said all of this tourenty, all this long singing. I was singing and doing concert for you. The reason I did all of this is just to explain that when Benin people then said that the Yoruba people were trying to force their culture on them by bringing all of them into ROF, you start seeing the ridiculousness of some of the things they were saying. It was the previous Oluwo of ROF that was Igbo. Current one is Yoruba. Oh, okay. The fact that it could even be an Oluwo and it's not Yoruba already tells you that it's not Ogboni. Ogboni is deep. Oh. That one is a deep, like they have their own. That one is deep. Now, about the evolution of Christianity in Yoruba land, and I think it's important for all of us to be part of it. But before I do that, I'll probably spend some time talking about Bishop. We'll probably have a session on Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther on his own before we now talk about that. You know, we need to also appreciate things not from a religious perspective, not as a Christian or as a Muslim or as a traditional, worshipper, just from an intellectual perspective, so that you see where we are, and don't judge Christianity in Yoruba land through the lens of Pentecostalism that started in the 1970s, which is interesting. It can also be traced to the 1920s if you count CNS, but that's another conversation. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that these people said that they were trying to use Ogboni. Let me see if I can find. I have a summary somewhere. Umbo. I have a summary somewhere, so let me find that summary. We are talking about Western region now. We'll talk about the East later. I want to find out. I had a summary I worked with the other time. The current Pentecostal waves are just altering our culture and traditions. No. What did they alter? They don't even have the capacity to alter your traditions. How did they alter it? Pentecostals did not alter your traditions. We have to be very careful. What's our power? How did they alter? What power did they have to alter your traditions? You could say they don't appreciate the traditions, but they couldn't have altered it. It is true that they don't appreciate it. It is true that they demonize traditions because everything is also construed to be spiritual, right? Even things all of us are supposed to be able to do, it's all turned into something deep. So you can say they demonize, but you can't say they alter. They couldn't have even altered if they tried. So let me quickly get into some of these things. I already talked about Ogboni, so let's stay on Ogboni for a bit. But where is that document? Oh, I'll find that document because I think the summary is better. Don't know if you waste your. Please give me a second. I'm going to find it. There's a particular song I was going to sing. I didn't sing what I really wanted to sing, but one of these days, somebody praise and worship. Talumawa. Praise and worship. Ma call for go. Ma call for to madu. Ṣé máa sanwó wọlé abẹ́ ni sanwó wọlé? Mi gbọ́. Ṣé máa sanwó wọlé abẹ́ ni sanwó wọlé? Mi ò mà rí kíní kẹ́. But I say we have to go to the original book because I can't find the summary. The summary saves me time, to be honest. All right, I think I found it. God is good. God is good. He has done me well, oh my soul. Rise up and praise the. can't believe I have this thing. I'm sorry, it's the same thing. Someone said all the time, even in the past, the Yoruba gospel musicians were aware. There was never a time in the Bible, there was not a time that they say, see, that thing is deep. I'm not even going to change it. I'm not going to get into it right now. When people come around and say issues nonsense, I just laugh because nobody ever said it was. There are about 4 different words used for Satan in the Bible, and they were interpreted differently in the Yoruba Bible. But I don't want to do theology today. What was I looking for? Am I worried? I think I know where it is. About to worry by and say, call on call much anybody to you. You want to see my wife and say. Just a second, please. Let's just read the book. If the shortcut is taking this long, we might as well just go through the quote unquote long cut. Let me just go back to the book, I beg. It's supposed to save me time, it's actually wasting my time. Let's go to that one on ROF. But let's just go back to the book. Again, I'm going to be reading from the Williams Commission report. I want to talk about the Ogboni thing very quickly. David German. Yes, so I said God is good. You said all the time. And all the time, God is good. Offering time, blessing time. All right, let me quickly read here. Another anxiety, which we have described in chapter 2, is the Reformed Ogboni Fraternity. This organization derives from its parent cult, Oaths of Secrecy, and its exact objects are not known to outsiders. But it is believed they include the duty of helping brother Ogbonis. When the fraternity spread among the minor officials of the Benin Delta provinces, it was widely believed that membership of the fraternity was a certain way to favor at their hands. This contributed to the general apprehension regarding the future. What is feared is a permanent action group majority in the Western House of Assembly. The action group joined its inspiration from a Yoruba society, the Egbemoduduwa, expressing itself as one of its manifestations through the Ogboni fraternity. Let me say something. If you notice what just happened right now, what's really happening is the conflation of an association with a cult. ROF, you can call it a cult, but it's not it's just like Freemasonry. Like you are going to a lodge. I wouldn't go because I have other associations that I'm pretty busy. But the point is that it's different from the Yoruba traditional Ogboni fraternity. So when people in the Midwest said, oh, this ROF is all over the place, in order to get ahead in politics, you have to join ROF, and that's how you people are trying to use, forgetting the fact that there are Igbos in ROF. And those Igbos were not necessarily trying to get ahead in Yoruba politics, in Western region politics. Maybe they wanted to get ahead in Yoruba politics, sure. But for some people, it was also this thing of, we have something hip that was made by us, and we can all be part of it. But again, these interesting people have a different idea of it. So they said what is feared is a permanent action group majority in the Western House of Assembly. The action group joined its inspiration from a Yoruba society, the Egbemoduduwa, expressing itself as one of its manifestations through the Ogboni fraternity, controlling the boards or corporations and commissions, eventually even the magistracy and judiciary, and aiming at the obliteration of all that is not Yoruba. That is what is meant by Yoruba domination. So, even so, I didn't know Amadu Bello was a member. Are you sure you're not talking about Zik? Zik was a member. I'm not sure of Amadu Bello. Then there was this other. I thought I had this thing here. It would have been a lot easier to. when they were talking about Ifa, you know what? Give me a second. I'll find this thing. This time I'll looking for. There's a keyword I think I'm looking for. Number. Okay, I think probably this one. Let me check this one. I apologize. Oh, sorry. Might be no. Go by the down on you. Unpublished manuscripts. God is good. Tí a bá farabalẹ̀, tójú bá farabalẹ̀ á rí mú. We'll find the other one later, but I think I've explained that one enough, to be honest. I'm actually not happy that I can't find this thing. Somebody's trying to come up. Ah, God is good. I found it. I have found it. Kowashiloku bayo. I found it. Sorry, just a second. 1 second. Let me just bring everything out at the same time so that there will be no issues at all. I found it. All right. This one is the one for the Eastern region, shall I don't want to start Eastern region right now. So let me read stuff from the Western region. Detailed testimony was heard from a broad range of witnesses, including Chiefs Ezomo, Oliha, Ine, and Osula. Other witnesses included the chairman of the Yekovia, Unwode, and Benin City Councils, namely Messrs. Adonri, Atonhegbe, and Ogbebo. Edo women made a submission through Madam Eweka. Complaints included lack of rubber markets and processing facilities, excessive local taxation, including air taxes, which would then be remitted to Ibadan. I'll explain. Poor infrastructure. Please, let's power tap on TikTok, please. Poor infrastructure and discrimination in the award of scholarships and opportunities for Edo women traders at Ibadan. More recently, Mr. Isaac Asemota recalled that while Benin City stayed in the dark with no electricity, running water, good roads, separate and unequal schools, and grossly inadequate health clinics, there in Ibadan, Edo tax monies were being squandered in the construction of Cocoa House, Mapo Hall, and commercial broadcasting service radio station, whose frequency we couldn't even pick up in Benin City. The best we could and could not be heard more than 2 miles away from the broadcasting booth. So, taxation, to be fair, Western region used to pay a lot of taxes. But the question is why? When we get to Awo and education, you understand why. In order to have free education and free health services, somebody had to pay. And the people who paid were the adults, right? Taxation, or it was called capitation at the time. But this idea of infrastructure not being in Benin all across Nigeria, the capitals, you will not see towns. It's not because the governors are bad, it's because it's the state capital. So people say things like, oh, look at what's happening in Ibadan. You know, we're not having it in our region, so we're not having it in our town. Were they having it in other Europe? Has it? Well, so if Ibadan had it, and you see the same thing you saw the same thing in Ife, You saw it in Ikene, which is quite interesting. Awo was from Ikene. Awo was not building what was building Ibadan in Ikene as well, because it was his hometown. You don't see it in Ikene or in Ijebu. You're just shouting Ibadan, Ibadan, Ibadan. Of course it will be in Ibadan because it's the capital. And then the thing about the fact that but again, these are the reasons, for wanting the Midwest. There's another book. I'll make sure I find it before next class. I thought I was going to need only the Williams Commission report. That's why I didn't, find it before today, but I'll find it before the next session. This is what I was looking for. The most powerful and emotional testimony from Benin came from Chief. You know the funny thing? This book, I've opened this book since, so I did not know it's inside the book. Oh my show. The most powerful and emotional testimony from Benin came from Chief H. Omosage. He lamented the insidious cultural role of Ifa divination and Ogboni activities. I found it. Oh my show. Sorry, I'm trying to pat myself on the back. Say I tried, I looked for it and I found it. The most powerful and emotional testimony from Benin City came from Chief H. Omosage. He lamented the insidious cultural role of Ifa divination and Ogboni activities. Please take it. Listen to this. So listen attentively. We are going to Bonsu. It says he lamented the insidious cultural role of Ifa divination and Ogboni activities in inserting Yoruba values and ways into Benin society. He explained that Ifa divination required knowledge of Yoruba, while the Yoruba-derived Ogboni society was, according to him, more dangerous than Freemasonry. In fact, he openly stated that after independence, laws would likely be passed making membership of the ROF compulsory. In other words, he's saying that after independence, the Yoruba people or Western region will pass laws that will make membership of ROF compulsory to everybody in Western region. I'll speak about that Ifa thing because it's even more important, but let's continue. He went on to criticize the Western Region Chiefs Law number 20 of 1957, which was being used with effect to intimidate traditional rulers and influence the selection of chiefs and dukes inside the Midwest. The chief also went into additional detail about perceptions of Yoruba domination of the police. I'll take that slowly. The chief also went into additional detail about perceptions of Yoruba domination of the police, government boards, the public service, and the use of scholarships as a tool for punishing separatist divisions. The Benin division, for example, had not, under the period of review, received any scholarships, while the Ijebu province, home to Awolowo, had received 17 such scholarships. Another complaint was that rubber was being developed in the Ijebu province when investment in the promised Ikoba rubber processing factory for already established rubber plantation of the Midwest was not being held. I will answer all these things later. In conclusion, the action group, through the establishment of the Ministry of Midwest Affairs and the Midwest Advisory Council, and demanded either the creation of a Midwest region or a return to a unitary government at the center with provinces at the periphery. Now, let me quickly speak on, it's already past 7, so I'll just respond to one thing. When we come back, we'll now answer these things based on the Williams Commission report, what the commission found, and what they reported. But let me quickly say something about Ifa that they brought up. If anybody comes to you in 1957 and tells you that Yoruba people are using Ifa to dominate Benin people in 1957, that person is a liar. He's a liar. And he mentioned Ogboni again, like you see, majority of these are from Ife, e.g. Ogun, another one, Olokun, Ailala, Shango, is from Oyo, and Ifa. Ifa's presence in Benin predated Nigeria. A lot of religious how do I put it now? Influences, right? A lot of religious influences that come from Ife, from Yoruba land, into Benin over time, because clearly the monarch is Yoruba, or at least has Yoruba ancestry. He's Benin, but has Yoruba ancestry. You get the point. He's from Ife. Therefore, a lot of things already came in over time, right? Including the craft, the bronze, what's it called? The brass that they make, the bronze they make, all those things, they are from Ife. That goes back to Ogola, Oba Ogola. The deities or the heroes, deities of Yoruba land also became theirs as well. So Ifa being present in Benin is not something that happened in 1957. It happened centuries before the Oyinbo even thought of coming to Nigeria. That's one. Number two, he said that you have to use Yoruba, in Ifa divination, and because of that, then the people have to learn Yoruba. Number one, the language of the court of the Benin palace, of the king, of the Oba, the language of the Oba's courts was Yoruba. That the language changed from being Yoruba, it never reached 100 years. Yoruba has always been the official language of the palace of Benin. Of course, they'll come in now. If I don't even bother coming, because I don't have the strength to argue with. They'll tell you now that it's a lie. The reason I said all of the strength is I don't want to be opening any new books. It's already past 7. But the point is that the people who were the Babalawos, right, understood Yoruba. Was anyone forced to learn Ifa in Benin or what? Nobody now. The idea basically is that they looked at it's like looking around and say, see Yoruba here, Yoruba here, Yoruba here. They are colonized also. Meanwhile, you're forgetting that your king himself came with those things, and he never stopped relating with Yoruba people. All this, we are bigger. At this, thank God it's changing now, Sha. It's changing now by faith. But there's always been a close connection between the Benin monarchy and kings of other Yoruba. I was saying the other day that 1937 Yoruba Conference of Chiefs, Benin was there. The meeting is Yoruba Conference of Chiefs. Oba Benin was there, 1937. There was no Yoruba, there was no region. Was there with the Yoruba, and the meeting was called. Some people call Yoruba Conference of Chiefs, Conference of Obas, but it was there. The point is that connection was never severed. So when a person comes to you and tells you that, they're using Ifa, they're using Ogboni, they want to colonize us. The colonization happened long before that time. I'm not saying we didn't colonize people, but I'm saying it was not Oyinbo that, it was not around that time. That one don't take. I was already settled. And that's why till today, the king is still Adimula, one of the titles of Oni. And he's also called the Igbákejì Òrìṣà, just like his brother king in Oyo. He's literally, I still listened to it this morning. I was like, and guys, your girl, Omonobanedo, Ikwa Polopolo. That connection has always been there, right? So when next we come, we're going to go deep into this. I'm a bit tired now. We're going to go deep into this. We're going to look at the things they said and also the findings of the group. And then we'll go into the Eastern region. Ifa is a divination system that was exported to different parts of Yoruba land, especially those, let me not even say this, but different parts of Yoruba land. Put in Remy. It was exported to different parts of Yoruba land. So Sikhism, that's why I fear for Zik himself ran away from Sikhism because Oh, Lori won it. He's not the leader. It was just named for him. That's what they told him. And they told him they were going to change the name. And they tried to change the name to something else. That's what will happen to, I think, too quiet, especially when all these lies are being told. No, our fathers did not keep quiet. They spoke. Oh. It's just that we didn't go back to listen to what they said. That's on us. Guys, I really want, let me tell you the truth. I'm trying to, in my head, should I continue, should I stop, should I continue? But let me just stop. It's 7. So if you'd like to speak, please come up. Send your request. I'll bring you up. And then we can listen to it. Maybe while you're talking, I'll get some more energy. So if you'd like to contribute, please send your request. When next we come, we'll talk about, so we're talking about the complaints of the Midwest. And again, there's some of the things they said very valid. For instance, Yoruba were dominating everywhere. There's nothing you will be able to do about that. So it makes sense that they want to have their own region because of the dominance. It makes sense. Like, I can't even lie about that. You know, but the other things they said, which I just think that you have to place within the historical context. You know, things like Ogboni and Ifa and the infrastructure, education, those ones I'm going to deal with when we come next time. But I think I have another 17 minutes or so before we close today because we started early. All right. So if you like to speak to this, please. Shekri did not want to be in the Midwest. Yes. We're not really going deep into the Midwest now. Sorry, into the Willing Minority Commission report. We're going to go deep into it next time. They wanted to be part. I mentioned earlier they wanted to be with the people in Ondo. But there were issues, right, with the Urhobo and Ijaw. And by the time they even got the Midwest, one of the first things they did was to remove that king. And to make sure that was an able person that was the premier of that region. That's why the Benis did all the groundwork. The Igbos took all the credit. Not just the credit, they took the benefits. 1 second, guys. So send your request, please.
We are not hearing you, Kabiyesi.
Thank you, Prof. Eshe. So I was saying that, please, if you want to send your request, if you want to speak, please send your request now. So I will not have the situation where, they said something I really want to respond to because time till law. You know, I want to prepare my mind now. If it's 1, 2, 3, and then we know. So wait for another minute, another few seconds. I found an article that summarizes the Zikism movement and how it failed. Kem, could you please send me a message? Maybe I will.
Okay. Yeah. Anyhow.
Okay. No. Any Edro. MIT go first. And any suru. Tori. Me time me. Ejeki J Fadlo. Then chill cheese. Then we'll now come to Prof. I think that's a better arrangement. And thank you for understanding. All right, J Fad. Okay, J Fad is always. I think that's issues
Hello,
with his
can I
network.
speak?
Chile cheese.
Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me?
yes.
Yes, I can you hear me?
My brother, your
All
network
right.
is
So I just needed a
not
clarification.
good.
It's very bad. That's right. Let me just go off. It's very, very bad, truly. It's very
Please,
bad.
we can hear you
Hello?
now. What's the clarification? Carries events. Nobody can post anything on the Red Open
The
Telegram
clarification is
channel. We
this.
don't.
Now, Oni belong is
Oh God,
also is in a need with that.
I cannot hear you. request. Okay, let Africa Facts I speak. There might be no problem. Chile,
no
don't worry. Next time, maybe I'll be able to answer your question. Thank you very much. Africa Facts, please go on.
But you were talking about, I heard when you were talking about people talking about, people from Benin talking about how much organizations such as the Buni movement and all of that, was influencing the politics or whatever they were getting in Benin. So the question I want to ask is, from your own observation, personally, as an observer, and your understanding of the world as it is, being aware that, some of our politicians, right from time, have belonged to these kind of organizations. How much do you think membership of these kind of organizations like the Freemason and the rest, how much do you think they actually play in the decisions that these people actually take? How much do you, in your own personal observation and belief, how much
What do you
these
think?
things play?
Let me ask you, what do you think?
Okay, it's my belief on those things is always changing. Sometimes I feel like they don't play any role. Sometimes I think they do. I feel like if a person has maybe dedicated their time to studying these people, these figures, I don't think I devoted as much time to studying some of these persons. But without mentioning names, I personally believe that certain persons, belong to those things. But I'm not talking about the cultural ones right from time, like the old Ogboni that was part of the Oyo Empire. I'm talking about number one, the ones that they brought in, and even the reform, movement. Like, where do how much at the mercy of such organizations are the citizenry?
So
That's basically what I want to know.
Let me quickly just thank you very much. So their involvement was not governmental. Let me just start by quickly saying that. So number one, so I'm not a member of Ogboni. I'm not in reformed Ogboni, but I think also that sometimes we can misinterpret certain things. I'm not saying you are. Did they have influence? Of course they did. I mean, it's just like saying, does Redeem have influence in Nigeria politics? Of course it does. Is it the kind of influence people think? Sorry, you have to mute. Is it kind of influence? People that say, "Oh, they're the one giving us the laws." No, not that kind of influence. The real thing is this, yeah. It's not a secret court. People knew who was in what. The thing is, the organization would have its own aims and objectives, influencing their members to see things from that perspective. Those members, of course, would then go ahead and do things or to regulate the way they would do what they want to do. For instance, just because a person, you cannot tell me that Zik was in ROF. Zik's his politics was not about ROF anything. It was about Igbo agenda. So we can't use ROF because they were ROF, they probably influenced. The influence was more personal than governmental. Direct influence now. If you're talking direct influence, it was more personal than governmental. The original Ogboni in Ife, which went to Oyo later, and to Ijebu and every part of Yoruba land, that one was governmental, not personal. It was organizational. In other words, it wasn't just an organization, God, to be honest. It was an arm of government. So it was governmental through and through. They made decisions for the government. They were part of the decision-making process, and they interpreted the laws. They were the judiciary of the realm. That's a governmental organization or governmental body. ROF is more about personal, interpersonal relationships than it is about direct governmental functions. It doesn't even have any governmental functions. So if the members then, of course, they, like I said, they have their own objectives, whatever they wanted to achieve. And if they're able to prosecute those things through their members who are in government, that would be a different thing, but not the kind of thing that Ogboni was doing back in the day. That's one. No, you said something else. And I think it answers the question. I hope it answers the question before Prof goes on. He will probably also add to it.
Okay, what I wanted to say, I want you to extend this your answer to even the foreign ones that they belong to. We talk about the ones that are ours, the ones such as maybe Freemasonry and the rest that they belong to.
Okay, you know what? At this point, I think you should tell us what you think. I mean, it's
what I think.
Okay, yeah, tell us what you think, because I've answered you. One is governmental, the other one is personal. The one that's personal has interpersonal, of course, the personal thing, of course, within that you have interpersonal stuff, but it also has its own organizational goals. It will, for instance, let me give you an example. It could influence certain things. So, for instance, let's say the organization wants to have free education for all young people. When we talk about these groups, I think also we have to be very careful of thinking everything is about me that introducing cultism to Nigeria. That's not the point, too. So let's say they want to have, and I'm not a member of the groups, anyone. Let's say they want to have free education, and that's one of the goals they want the group has, or the leadership of the groups. They want every young person to be educated. They have members in government now. They're going to tell them, guys, pass the bill that will help. So it's at the end of the day, it's about the people. It's not about anything for. Let me tell you what actually gives them the flex. Is that the powerful people in the realm are actually members of that organization, which means amongst themselves they can decide certain things that they want to do. If it is now what they're, and if you're not making it look like as if is they are now part of the government, I'm going to have to require, like, because I think that's where you're going. I'm going to have to require maybe like I would have to have like proof. I can't just talk and based on conjectures, right? I'm going to have proof like, oh, this is what they did. This is what they did and all of that. When you talk about, because I've looked at their politics, what did they really do that you can say, okay, I only lower one? Like, say, Skulls and Bones in the US, or like the Freemasonry. Like, what exactly have they done? Like, you say, combine on what on they say. Me, I can't be say to that change the politics in Nigeria, but maybe that's just me, sha. I don't want to overthink it unless I have something concrete, and I don't have anything concrete. But if I do, I'm going to research. I'll do some research. If I do, thank you very much. I don't get your response, but thank you very much, sir. So let's go to Prof. Prof. Oh yeah. Thank you, Africa Facts guy.
Honestly, I don't like. I think there's this so much obsession about all this stuff, and I don't. You know that I'm more concerned about the history that is very relevant to our political system. Honestly, the others are just maybe for personal pride. But I live in the now, and I want to understand this particular process, right? So whether Ogboni has 20 organizational or there's like actually how they impacted this whole stuff. To things, but that wasn't what RF was doing, right? Like you've mentioned, RF was was a reactionary response to the European Christian model, right? Oh, you must give your child Christian name. You cannot, do polygamy and all of those things that they felt are impacting African life, and that was the reaction to it, and also to make a semblance of Ogboni accessible to people that are not from the upper class in Yoruba land, because Ogboni also is not for everybody. You have to be a certain level of being the upper class, if I'll say, in Yoruba land. So they did that. Right. So but the important thing to look at is not like nobody is asking Benin people to close their shop and they are doing Iwode, or they are doing or anything, or people cannot come out. Nothing like that was happening. What was basically happening was political. And the interesting thing was that the people that were at the helm of the Reform Ogboni fraternity in Benin were also Benin people. So it wasn't even Yoruba. It was the likes of Gaius Obaseki, right? And people like H.U.Wifo, right? Those were the main, H.U.Wifo was the chief tax clerk at a particular point in that place, right? And the Reform Ogboni members a lot of them tend to be the member of the Benin Taxpayers Association. Benin Taxpayers Association was at a point allied with AG. So you can see the whole connection, right? And because of that, they tend to be in power. So some of the issues that, these people tend to, when they are praising people for tax, they appraise people that are not BTPA members terribly. So especially if you're a member of Otuedo, because Otuedo was also the local response to the whole BTPA stuff, right? Yeah, so the Otuedo people, we claim that they assess us terribly because we are not members of ROF, and because of that we are not members of BTPA, right? Or opportunities. So those are the things. Those are how it was happening in that place. Yes, they withered a lot of just because a lot of them were the highly educated class among the Benin's, right? So they took power, they aligned with AG and a number of things. So those were the issues you were seeing there. On the other side, you will have people like Omo Saye, right? And the interesting thing about this whole thing was that the whole movement started as a Benin Delta People's Party or People's Movement, BDPP, right? Where the Oba was the patron and all of those things. By the time it became big, it became the Midwest State Movement. They put the Oba to one side, right? Osade Beiboma was the president. Obi of Agbo was the patron. They didn't even give the Oba any title there, right? The IS was almost Hage, which they give deputy leader and was ineffective. Every other person was from other area. I know you don't want to go into infrastructure and but so I will avoid talking about that. The only thing I want to also add is that the Ijaws growl was different too. So the Ijaw were not giving the Shekiri problem at this point. The people that were giving the Shekiri problem at this point were the ego.
Okay. I mentioned Ijaw earlier, Abi.
Locked into worry, and the Urobos were. Matter of fact, I think 2 years with the Shakiris, right? And then when you hear the testimony of someone like of at the Willings Commission, or to press at this time, at the Willings Commission was now anti-Awolowo at that point. So, and it was testifying in support of the Midwest States movement. However, I think F.R.A. Williams was the lawyer for AG. I think, is it lawyer for AG? There's Fani Kayode was lawyer for AG. F.R.A. Williams was lawyer for the government of the Western region, right? I think when they now probed Autopress, I agreed that, look, all these things I want to go with these Midwest people, it's fear of what these people will do to us. Right? In his testimony, there's a way, if you read Michael Vican's book, Ethnicity and Subnational in Nigeria, it's you know, what all he's saying, the thing slipped out, like, it is fear because the Igbos and the Urobos, we dealt with us. So it is better for us to just align with them. And the Urobos came to that commission and they were threatening them. They didn't hide it. What they will do if they don't fall in line and all of those. So you read Michael Vickers did a good. He had 2 volumes, it's Nation Betrayed and then Ethnicity and Subnational in Nigeria, where he dealt with the 2. The interest of the Ijaw, and those are the Western Ijaw in the Western region, was they want to be merged with the Eastern Ijaw. That's the Ijaws in the Eastern region, so that they form a region of their own. Right? They were not interested in the Midwest. They don't want to be part of it, and they don't want to be part of the Western region. They just want to be merged with their brothers on the other side, and they form a single unit. So that's the thing there. Okay. We avoid talking about we'll keep infrastructure to the other time, but when you look at the whole argument from these people, it makes no sense, right? I mean, some minorities make sense in the other region, because this issue of they were calling us Kobo Kobo, right? The origin of they were calling us Kobo Kobo came from people like Dennis Osadebe that told them, these people, in the early meetings of the Midwest, that these people, these Yoruba people are this, they are bad, they are that. This was what they call us there. This is how they treat us. These are this. It's not me. If you read, you will see. These were the things that they told you. Be there. The Shakiris we get the other, but those other ones, they should not. They should go with their people across the Niger. They were a big problem in that first republic, and I stand by it. So when you get into the infrastructure and co, we can now deal with the individual issues. Thanks, Kabiesi.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Prof. And we're going to go deep into that on Friday. I want to spend some time to talk about Midwest. So, Lodge Friday, the primary book will most likely be the Williams Commission report of 1958, and we'll read about the Shakiri, the claims that people are something that people are writing in the comment section, which is, of course, this is right, but we'll revisit those things. We also talk about what happened in the 40s in the Midwest, in the Benin, and also what happened in 1952 that now somehow catalyzed the agitation, that even not catalyzed, sped it up, right? What happened that caused that speeding up in 52? We'll talk about that on Friday. We'll also talk about the response of the action group to what the Oba on one side and Azikiwe on the other hand were trying to accomplish in the Midwest struggle, like Professor Remy just alluded to. So talk about all of those things on Friday. But tomorrow, we are going to be here at 1 p.m. if your time was African time. We'll be listening to a recording. It's going to be something very nice. I'll keep it on the wrap. So when you come tomorrow, you listen to it. It's very nice. That will be tomorrow, 1 p.m. if your time was African time, right? I want to thank everybody who has made today's session a success. Thank you, Badge. Badge on YouTube writes, it's possible they have an influence. I think I was talking about the ROF and Freemasonry. It's possible they have an influence, but we can't prove it. It's human nature. In the US, for instance, big corporations donate to politicians to help in making laws in their favor. Yes, but because we can't prove it, I'm very careful not to say it because I can't prove it. If it's about big corporations, you can say it. But even when you talk about certain organization, certain cults like that, you can't. But there are some you can prove. There's certain things you can find in Freemasonry, for instance, are documented that it's easier to talk on rather than things that we don't know for sure. But regardless of what they influence or how they influence, I think the way to see what they are influencing is in the results that are available or that are visible, right? And when you look at the results, it doesn't really look like these people really cared for. If you really ask me, I think people like Zik used ROF as a ladder to climb up the social class, right? Or to gain acceptability with certain groups of people, or to, essentially those two things. Because I don't see anything that you can say, okay, ROF taught this person something, he now did it in society. I can't see it. Whether it was, I don't know if ROF could not have taught him to steal £877,000 from Eastern region, and he stole that money. ROF could not have made him do any things that he was doing in the Western region to try to destroy other groups.
Yes. Don't you see the similarity between Zik and this man that listens to advice from mad people? Both of them listen to advice from mad people, right?
But also to government money. And put it in banks. God bless.
And their people stood solidly behind them.
Yes.
Their people stood solidly behind them. The two of them did the same thing.
Same thing. The man took money, put it in his own bank, and then said, how can you be the head of government? You facilitate money leaving the government into your own personal bank, and then you distribute that money to your own personal companies. And after a while, they ask you for the money, you didn't get it back. Why is he calling me Kabesi? Because we know each other outside TikTok. That's why he's called it. That's what he calls me. We go way back. TikTok is just where we are right now, but that's why he calls me that. I hope that answers your question. He said he was prudent. The one who did it recently, the only difference is that at least this one got his money back. Thank you, Chilechi. That's one of the reasons for the Foster Sutton Commission. The matter went all the way to the House of Lords in the UK, in the Parliament. I think I read the document here. I read the answer. The one that's from 1956. And just if not for Yoita, nobody go know anything, because the people go cover up for him. And as they covered up for him on £877,000, he also covered up for one for reason $33,000. It's an interesting. Again, Nigerian politics is like deja vu.
The late Justice Udo Odoma, was it him or his sons? I think maybe it's him or his son's book diary, Ayonte Udoma, that said Zik surrounded himself with young men that have had tarnished careers, so that they will feel beholden to him. Owanfo Rizu, Ikejiani. All of them. Look at all those guys around him. They all have one thing or the other. Either forged certificates, they were sent to prison, then he saved them and all of those things, right? So similarities are just too much between both of them. The same way he had the Zikist movement is the same way this one to have the obedient movement.
Yes.
Right? So the similarities are just too much. The same way there were some Yoruba bots in the Zikist movement, that's the same way you have them in this stuff too. Right? Yep. So
it's the same spirit.
It's a circle, man.
But I hope at least let's break the cycle, right? Because the vicious cycle it's a sad thing when it's called that. The reason we keep getting ourselves in it is probably because we have not learned from the past, and it's a shame. But I think it's worse when it's called that people are actually, it's as though they have this playbook and they are using that against us. Adeoke Adelabu, no, Chilechi, you are wrong. Adeoke Adelabu was not a Yoruba bot. When you say these things with confidence, how was he a Yoruba bot? Chile, please help us, teach us. How was he a Yoruba bot?
Adeoke Adelabu was a proper Ibadan man.
How was he a Yoruba boy? But because he worked with NCNC. Hey, may have personal issues with
You have to
our.
understand the politics around that time.
Please continue, Prof. Continue.
No, I said people have to understand the politics. See, that people are against. I think we have to stop this thing.
I think your network is going in and
Really?
share today. The network good? Okay, they say it's TikTok glitch. Okay, please continue. I'll speak after you.
That nobody will question that. Yoruba do not do that, right? You question things. You invite stuff, So yeah.
Different
So
opinions.
Adegoke Adelabo has his own perspective and opinion of things, and you have to understand how Nigeria changes that were happening, in some of the institutions that those people also valued. Before labeling, I mean, someone like what you call this man, C.O.S. Benson, you might not like him, at least for some of his actions at the beginning, right? But later life, go and read the answer. Omari Boshaman Baonko in the whole House of Rep stuff. It gives me joy at times, right? And if you want to be flogging those people, play one align with this one, align this AG, go back and align with NCNC and form of God. Abi, we're saying one person we can forgive is acceptable, the other is not. Is not acceptable. Should that even have happened? To even be realistic, right? Should that even have happened?
No.
So, but some things just alive, just let it move. These were the people that were instrumental to sending Chief Omafima, but to prison. But it still happened. So we cannot be having double rules. People evolve. A lot of these people also evolve in their political life. Don't just take one point. But at the point they were against Chief, go and look at some of them changed in their later life. Some of them became better. Some of them became worse. And Arrow was Chief Obafemi's friend. And later things did not go well between them again. It was in the opposing camp. He went to the opposing camp. But some people will tell you as if they were all together for life. So people need to, learn that. I just only he will go there, eat and drink, and he will talk to
He supported him about. You don't know what you're talking about. I think I remember you right now. I just remember you now. You're the one that's always changing accounts. You don't know what you're talking about. I was supported state government, Lagos being capital in 1953, and you're writing it boldly. Abba. Oh, anything you write is even correct. You're right. Thank you, everybody, for a fantastic session today. Thanks to everybody in the comment section. Thank you for liking and sharing the live and for tapping and typing and gifts and everything. And thank you on YouTube as well. Thank you very much for your gifts. Thank you for your support. We're going to call it a day now. We'll be here again tomorrow at 1 p.m. if your time was African time tomorrow. Tomorrow is half session. We're not having a full session, but it's going to be impactful as well. So please don't come late because we don't spend so much time like we do on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So tomorrow is Thursday. Let's make it early and we'll have a fantastic session, all right? Before we go, we're going to play the anthems, Nigerian anthem, and also the Yoruba anthem. But I should say to our folks on YouTube that we're going to have to let you go because we always have this copyright thing with YouTube not allowing us to play the music. Or if we play, we'll have the strike. So thank you very much for being here on YouTube. I'll see you again 1 p.m. if your time was African time tomorrow.